Story 1.
Cheating wife left me for a younger man, but my revenge and new love made her regret everything. Arthur, are you listening? You just need to sign the papers, and we're finished. My wife, Annie, whom I've been married to for over 25 years, was speaking to me. I tried to pay attention, but her voice seemed to drift further away as her rant continued. It all began this afternoon when I came home from work. Annie sat at the table with a glass of wine and a determined expression. Unfortunately, she only had one glass, neglecting to consider if I might want one too, especially given the direction our conversation was taking. I sensed trouble brewing as I sat down. Without asking about my day, Annie plunged into the news that she was leaving me. She claimed to have found her soulmate, someone who made her happier than I ever did, rendering me no longer adequate. Despite her escalating volume, her words became increasingly distant to me. Our story followed a familiar pattern. We met in high school, stayed together, and welcomed our daughter Sally shortly after getting married. While she wasn't the primary reason we tied the knot, she was always part of the plan. Presently, we both held steady jobs, lived comfortably, and had managed to pay off our house with some savings to boot. We frequently professed our love, took family vacations, and though our physical closeness had waned over time, we still found moments of intimacy. I believed our love ran deep, and we were destined to grow old together, until this afternoon. Annie's rant continued, her face reddening with each passing moment. Arthur, look at me. It became increasingly difficult to focus, but I turned towards her. You need to sign these papers, she pointed adamantly at the documents before me. Her tone was demanding, yet I struggled to maintain concentration. It felt as though the room's brightness and color were fading, despite the kitchen lights being on. Internally, I was fraught with emotion, but externally, my body remained unresponsive. The longer I stayed silent, the angrier Annie grew. The last thing I remember is her slap. Though I couldn't feel the impact, I imagined it leaving a prominent red mark. But still, I couldn't move, and the world seemed to darken around me. It had been a long day. The drive home from university was delayed due to an accident slowing everyone down. When I arrived home, there was an eerie quietness in the house. The lights were on, Dad's car was in the driveway, but Mom's was nowhere to be seen. Upon entering the kitchen, I threw my bag and books on the ground. Dad sat at the table, motionless, staring into space. On the table lay an open bottle of Mom's wine and a mostly empty glass. In front of Dad were papers with numerous "Sign Here" tabs. Approaching Dad, I touched his shoulder from behind. Hey, Dad, I anticipated a response, but he remained unresponsive. Walking around to face him, I was taken aback. His eyes appeared glazed, almost milky white, with traces of tears staining his cheeks. He wasn't blinking, and a trail of drool hung from his mouth, threatening to drip into his lap. Panicked, I called out, Dad, Dad, come back to me, Dad! Tears welled in my eyes. With no response from Dad, I tried to calm myself. Slow down, Sally. Dad needs help, I whispered to myself. Retrieving my phone, I dialed emergency. I explained that my father, Arthur, was unresponsive. After providing my details and address, they dispatched an ambulance, promising a 10-minute arrival time. I sat beside Dad, holding his hand, offering reassurance. This man had been my everything growing up. Despite his demanding job, he always made time for my school events, musicals, and ballet. He endured my early attempts at the violin, encouraging me every step of the way. On my 16th birthday, he surprised me with a harder-to-find violin, not the best, but it held sentimental value as it came from him. Now, 5 years later, I was studying music at university, with a focus on strings and violin, thanks to his unwavering support. As I waited, questions raced through my mind. Why was Dad like this? What had happened? And where was Mom? Glancing at the paperwork on the table, the words "petition for divorce" caught my eye. Shocked, I began reading, my skin crawling at the revelation that Mom wanted to divorce Dad for reasons unknown to me. It appeared highly likely that Dad's condition stemmed from the documents, especially considering Mom's open wine bottle, indicating she had given Dad the papers and left. People often speculate on the rapid fluctuation of emotions. I suppose they've never experienced such a betrayal. For me, any compassion and desire to be in my mother's presence faded away shortly after the ambulance arrived. I directed them in getting Dad onto a gurney and off to the hospital. After locking up the house, I followed behind, making calls as I drove. I contacted my grandmother, Dad's mom, his sister Rhonda, his best friend, and then his manager at work, informing them of Dad's situation and his impending absence. I explained that I found him unresponsive and that he was en route to the hospital. Everyone requested updates on his condition, and his manager assured me of arranging emergency leave and informing their boss. I knew I was putting off the next call, consumed with anger, but I felt compelled to call Mom. The phone rang and she answered after a couple of rings. "Hi, Sally, my darling. How was your day?" I was taken aback by her casual tone. Surely she couldn't be so naive as to think I wouldn't know what was happening. It had been almost an hour since I found Dad, and Mom was well aware of my routine. "Where are you, Mom?" "I'm out and about, sweetie," she trailed off, sensing my inquiry. "So in other words, you've just shattered my father, your husband, and left him without a second thought." "Oh no, darling. I tried to explain to your father about Paul and the situation, but he wasn't responsive, so I thought it best to leave and let him process that we won't be living with him anymore." Her attempt to downplay the situation infuriated me. Given Dad's state, it seemed more likely that she had ripped his heart out and left it shattered before him. "It appears to me like you abandoned him when he needed help. Are you truly that heartless? Do you even understand what's happening now, or do you simply not care?" Anger began to seep into my voice. "Sweetie, don't get angry now. I understand this is a shock, but your father will be fine. I'm only asking for what is rightfully mine and some support while Paul and I wait to marry." Yep, my mother was firmly in la-la land. "Angry? You haven't seen angry yet, Mother. And just so you know, I'm currently following Dad to the hospital. He's in an ambulance, and when I got home, he looked like he'd had a stroke." "Oh, Sally, my sweetie, I'm sorry to hear that, but—" "No excuses, Mother. Let me ask you, is this Paul you're running off with the same Paul from your work that you keep talking about?" She hesitated. "Of course, darling, Paul. The man from my mother's workplace. She never stopped mentioning him. So, let me get this straight. He's a dozen years younger than you, and you've been having an affair with him for how long again?" She hesitated. 6 months, right? So, for the last 6 months, you've been involved with someone from your workplace behind Dad's back. You've been lying to Dad and me, hiding your affair. I had no idea you were capable of such deceit, and clearly neither did Dad, judging by the state you left him in. How did you expect either of us to react? Well, I suppose not positively at first, but once we're living with Paul, you'll see we're meant to be together. We? She had just referred to we for the second time. Did she expect me to abandon Dad to move in with her and her boyfriend? I could feel my anger boiling over. I knew I would say something regrettable if I didn't stop. I'm going to hang up now before I say something I might regret, but let me be crystal clear. I will not be leaving Dad, and there's no way I'm going anywhere near Paul, let alone moving into the place you and he are cavorting in. "Sally," my mother responded sharply, "I am your mother, and I will not be spoken to like that, regardless of how upset you are." "Then I guess we're done talking." I hung up before she could say anything else. If she thought I would condone what she was doing, she had another thing coming. She tried calling me back multiple times, then started calling Dad's phone, which was silly because, if he could, I doubted he would pick up a call from her. Since I had Dad's phone with me, I ignored any calls from her. By the time I reached the hospital, the ambulance crew had admitted Dad, and he was in a ward under observation. Aunt Rhonda had arrived and informed me that she had also received several calls from my mother but wasn't sure what was happening other than her brother being in the hospital. When I explained the situation, Aunt Rhonda turned a deep shade of scarlet, almost as if steam were coming out of her ears. "Sally, do you have the documents that woman left for my brother?" "Sure, Aunt Rhonda. Here you go." Aside from being my aunt, Rhonda was also our family attorney. For the next hour, we sat beside Dad as Rhonda read through the documents, occasionally muttering under her breath. Doctors and nurses came in and out of the room periodically, checking on Dad. "Well, the bad news is that your mother is going to get her divorce from your father. The schedule outlined here shows that this process has been in motion for over 2 months and had to be served this week, or it would have incurred significantly higher fees from her legal team." I shrugged. I had heard enough justification from my mother. I was determined to ensure that she and Dad separated for what she had done. It was strange. I was never particularly close to my father, always looking up to my mom, but her actions seemed plain foolish. This whole mess seemed to be orchestrated by Paul, her so-called soulmate. Regardless, Mom and Dad weren't going to weather this storm, especially if Dad's current condition was any indication. The good news is that she hired a shire of a lawyer to represent her. She's going to have to shell out a hefty sum just for the divorce and even more if it goes to court, Rhonda grinned. Meanwhile, my dear brother has the best lawyer in town, and he's getting the family discount. We shared a smile for the first time that evening. Additionally, some of the claims here, like wanting 50% equity in the house and 60% of the financial assets, along with spousal and child maintenance, are likely quite exaggerated. I assume from your reaction that you're not planning to live with your mother? I shook my head in confirmation. Good, okay. I have some initial thoughts. However, we need to see what happens with your dad over the next 24 hours. Your mother could already be in hot water for abandonment and mental cruelty. The next few days flew by, with doctors constantly checking on Dad. Physically, he was fine and healthy, but he remained unresponsive. I managed to continue my university studies in the hospital chair by his bed, laptop, and textbook in hand. Occasionally, a family member would relieve me, allowing me to go home, catch a few hours of sleep, and return. I'll admit, I shed a few tears at home, alone in the house. One of the most surprising moments during Dad's hospital stay was when Tina Williams, the owner of the company where Dad worked, paid him a visit. While I knew Dad's manager, Tom, I had never met Tina herself. Tina was a striking woman, curvaceous without being overweight, with tan skin, dark, raven hair, and mesmerizing blue eyes that could make any person, male or female, swoon. As it turned out, Dad had been part of a group at his workplace that had supported Tina a few years back during her messy divorce. Her unfaithful ex-husband had attempted to claim a significant portion of their savings and nearly succeeded in taking half of her business. Dad had introduced her to Aunt Rhonda, who had successfully protected Tina's assets, ensuring she didn't lose any business shares and securing child support for her then 6-year-old daughter. Tina visited Dad several times, expressing shock when I briefed her on the general summary of why he was hospitalized. She brought cards from everyone at Dad's workplace and spent time holding his hand, sharing stories from the office. It turned out Dad had a knack for humor in the workplace, and his absence was deeply felt by his colleagues. I should mention that Dad is an accountant by profession, working for one of the financial clearinghouses that assist banks in processing payments to financial institutions. While the work may be tedious, Dad apparently brightened up the workday for everyone with his humor and presence. About 2 weeks later, I returned from a shower and a nap at home to find Rhonda and Tina in the midst of a conversation. Although it seemed a bit heated, their frustration was aimed at my mother rather than each other. It turned out that my mother had sent a demand letter to Tina, requesting access to all of Dad's bonuses from the past few years. It didn't matter that the bonuses had already been paid out, Rhonda remarked, sporting an exploitative grin. The letter demanded that she receive 50% of them within 30 days into a designated bank account, or she would pursue legal action against Tina. Besides the absurdity of her claim for money already dispersed, it seems like she and her new partner are in dire financial straits since I've frozen all the joint assets while Arthur is incapacitated. I chuckled, making my presence known. Yes, this morning, I received my first communication from Mom in 2 weeks, a text message asking if I could lend her a few thousand. I haven't responded because I'm still pretty upset with her. I mean, she hasn't even asked about Dad since I told her what she did to him. Over the past couple of weeks, Tina had become fiercely protective of my dad. Whenever my mother was brought up, Tina's eyes narrowed, her voice dropping in pitch, indicating her deep disdain for Annie. It was as if I could see sparks flickering around her smoldering eyes. I just hoped she never had to be in the same room with my mother, otherwise I feared she might incinerate her on the spot. Despite my current feelings toward my mother, she was still my mother. She has destroyed the most wonderful man, Sally. If it weren't for your father, I wouldn't have my Clarice or my business. So many people in the office helped me during one of the lowest points in my life, but your father took the time to listen to me. He never judged my ex-husband or me. He just let me talk. No one has ever done that without offering an opinion. He introduced me to your aunt here, ensuring I was taken care of. If he were single, I would have pursued him with everything I had after my divorce. I shrugged to let a smile grace my face. He won't be married much longer. Their faces registered realization, and Rhonda giggled while Tina smiled. Thanks, Sally, I needed that. I still can't believe what your mother has done to him, or that she discarded such an amazing man. I need to head back to the office, but before I do, Tina walked over to my dad, and as Rhonda and I watched, she bent down and gave him a tender but sincere kiss on the lips. She looked up at us and smiled. However, her smile quickly turned into shock when my dad emitted a groan. As I gradually woke up, I sensed soft lips on mine, just the right amount of pressure, conveying a gentle and tender affection I hadn't felt in a long time. The hospital room's beeping and my groans reminded me of my surroundings. Anticipating Annie's presence as I opened my eyes after that affectionate kiss, I was surprised to find Tina standing there with a smile on her face. Tina, approaching from the other side of the bed, Sally and Rhonda joined us. It's okay, Daddy. You're going to be okay, Sally said. As my memories caught up with me, I realized Annie was leaving me, or had already left. What happened? Over the next few minutes, the three of them filled me in on how Sally had found me unresponsive, called an ambulance, and discovered the divorce papers, revealing Annie's months-long infidelity. I learned how Annie had threatened Tina once Rhonda froze our finances until they could determine my condition. How long? 2 weeks? Arthur asked. 2 weeks, Rhonda replied. I turned to Tina. You kissed me? Tina blushed. Yeah, sorry, I was about to head back to the office and was saying goodbye. I smiled. No, it's okay. I guess I'm on the market, so I think it's okay. Over the next few hours, various doctors came through, conducting physical checkups, blood tests, and more. Tina canceled her visit to the office and stayed, along with Rhonda and Sally. Among the doctors was a psychologist. As he probed into my experiences, I recounted finding Annie alone, drinking, and her announcement of leaving me. I described how the world seemed to lose color, and sensory input became disjointed, making it difficult to move. Despite growing upset, my last memory was of Annie slapping and yelling at me, her words incomprehensible. The girls collectively gasped at the revelation of Annie's aggression while I was unable to respond. Dad, what time do you think it was when you became unresponsive? I'd say it was around 5:30, baby. Or why? Because it was past 7:30 when I got home and found you, and there was no red mark on your cheek. So I assume Mom must have left you there alone for quite some time. The psychologist interjected. It's not uncommon for someone in your situation to experience misuse while unresponsive. In your case, I'd say you went into shock upon hearing your wife's declaration of leaving you. Although this is a much more extreme case than usual, it does make sense. Rhonda added, when Arthur was young, there was a bully a few years older than him. He teased Arthur quite a bit, and one day a neighborhood parent found Arthur lying on the ground in a local park. Our parents put him to bed and he woke up the next morning. It wasn't overthought as he woke up regularly the next day, but it did happen. I remember Billy pushing me around and teasing me in the park. After a while, I didn't know what happened, but when I woke up, Mom and Dad told me I had passed out and someone brought me home. When I told them about Billy, they spoke to his parents. The next day, Billy came up to me at school and apologized. I chuckled at the memory. I don't think he was sincere, but he never bothered me again after that day. I believe we may have a precedent here, the psychologist mentioned. In many ways, the mind remains poorly understood. However, if something similar has occurred before, it's plausible it could happen again. I frowned. He reassured. I wouldn't worry too much. With the love and attention of these three lovely ladies, even if something were to happen again, I believe you will be well taken care of. We conversed for a few more minutes before he excused himself. I also found myself fatigued, which might seem odd for someone who had just slept for the past 2 weeks, but I was. So I sent all three girls home to rest and informed them they could visit me tomorrow to ensure I was all right. Over the next 2 days, I eased back into life. Tina brought me a work laptop and a few simple tasks to complete, with instructions to only do them if I felt bored. Rhonda visited primarily to review her revised divorce documents and to have me sign some papers so she could proceed with ending my marriage to Annie. Rhonda also brought along a young detective, Karen Hill. Detective Hill conducted an hour-long interview with me regarding my experience that night with Annie. She thanked me and informed Rhonda and me that her report would be ready in a few days. I wasn't certain if we were planning to file a complaint against Annie eventually. However, Rhonda instructed me to leave everything to her, kissed me on the forehead, and departed. On the second afternoon, after waking up from what Sally dubbed my checkout, I was discharged to return home. Sally accompanied me, and I was surprised to find Tina waiting at the door. She assisted Sally in guiding me to her large suburban SUV. Tina stayed for dinner that night. We opted for takeout and she pitched in to clean up before, staying to watch TV with us for a couple of hours. When she left, Sally hugged her and made sure I walked her to her car. Tina, thank you so much for everything you've done these past few weeks. I don't know how I can repay you. Well, in a few weeks, when you're feeling back on your game, you can take me out for dinner and dancing. I blushed. Here I was, just an afternoon out of the hospital, and the woman whose kiss had awakened me was asking me out. But she was attractive, and according to Annie, I was to be a single man again. Okay, next Friday night after work. That gives me almost 2 weeks to get myself back to normal. She nodded and gave me a warm hug. It lingered a little longer, and I sensed a deeper meaning. As she got into her car, I found it amusing that, for a moment, I wondered about the name of the woman I had been married to for almost 25 years. For the next few days, Sally, Rhonda, and Tina hovered around me, ensuring I was all right. It was comforting to be cared for in such a way. However, the news Rhonda brought me that Friday afternoon caught all of us a little off guard. This afternoon, Annie got arrested, she announced. What happened? I inquired. Well, after your statement to the police at the hospital, they issued an arrest warrant for Annie on grounds of mental cruelty to a person with a disability. This is because you were mentally disabled and unable to defend yourself at the time. Also, she left you unattended for an unspecified period, which adds to her troubles, she explained. What does this mean for the divorce? Tina, who had joined us again for dinner, asked that evening. She had her 8-year-old daughter, Clarice, with her, who was watching a Disney movie in the lounge room while we conversed. First, with Monday marking my return to work, Tina would see me then. However, I was starting to grasp that she was seeking more than just an efficient number cruncher in the office. I found myself not objecting to the idea of Tina and picturing her, contemplating what lay beneath those nicely fitting clothes she wore whenever she visited, I thought. Rhonda grinned. It's likely going to tilt a few things in Arthur's favor. I'm advocating for a 50-50th split of the bank accounts in the house. I know we could aim for more, given the circumstances, but reckon Arthur would want to be fair. I nodded. Annie won't be able to touch any of the bonus money she tried to extract from you, Tina continued. I filed a case against her for extortion alongside the mental cruelty charge. It won't do much except prevent her from accessing what isn't rightfully hers. She'll probably be out in a couple of days, none the worse for wear, and likely back with her wretched soulmate. What I aim to do is expedite the divorce using Arthur's hospitalization and recovery as a pretext. Then, depending on her reaction, I have plans in motion. I'll ensure Arthur doesn't lose anything he shouldn't, she said, smiling. So, how long will the divorce take, Aunt Rhonda? Sally inquired. Assuming everything goes smoothly, it should take around 3 months. After that, if Annie decides to contest anything, I'll bring in reinforcements, which will prolong the process but inflict more damage on her, Rhonda explained. That evening, as I escorted Tina to her car, Sally assisted Clarice into the back seat of the large Suburban. Tina embraced me once again and surprised me with a quick kiss, reminiscent of the other day. Arthur, I know you're married, and you're a man of honor, so I won't rush things. But I want to lay claim to you now and let you know that I desire you. I've wanted you for a long time, of course, but I'd never pursue a married man or disrespect someone's marital vows. I've experienced that myself, and I wouldn't want to inflict that on someone else, even if their marriage is in trouble, Tina expressed sincerely. For a moment, I gazed into her deep blue eyes, brushed a strand of her dark hair from her face, and then leaned in to kiss her. Instead of a tender kiss, it became one filled with passion, lasting perhaps 30 seconds. I sensed the mutual connection between us. When I pulled back, Tina's eyes were closed, and she ran her tongue over her lips, savoring our kiss. I grinned. Consider that my acknowledgement of your claim. We glanced at the girls, both of them giggling at our kiss. Clarice was clapping, and Sally sported a huge grin. As Tina and Clarice drove off, Sally hugged me, and we waved goodbye. The following months were quite a ride. On one hand, Annie wanted a speedy divorce, but on the other, she wasn't content with the settlement. It seemed Paul was calling the shots, convincing her she deserved the lion's share of the assets. He was feeding her lies, and deep down, she must have realized it after so many years of marriage. As her settlement demands grew more absurd, Rhonda had a single conversation with Annie's lawyer, and whatever was said put an end to all objections overnight. Tina and I went on dates every Friday night while Sally began babysitting Clarice, picking her up from school and looking after her, giving Tina and me time for dinner, coffee, and entertainment. Though we never went beyond holding hands and kissing, I had a feeling the night my divorce finalized would be unforgettable. Back at work, now things were going smoothly. While we were a successful financial organization, we weren't in the big leagues. We all did our jobs, were well compensated, and enjoyed each other's company. I think the staff caught on to Tina and me becoming an item at some point. Although everyone was happy for us, I had to dial back my usual antics. My direct manager, who reported to Tina, made sure to remind me of appropriate workplace behavior, considering I was essentially dating his boss. About 3.5 months later, we received a notification that the divorce would be finalized 1 week from the upcoming Thursday. There were no court proceedings, however. Annie had requested a meeting to discuss matters before the final decree. I agreed to meet the day before, and we arranged for her to visit the house to speak with both Sally and me. I had taken the afternoon off from work and prepared lamb chops and gnocchi in a burnt butter sauce for the 3 of us. It was a favorite meal for all of us, and I hoped it would help ease any potential awkwardness during our conversation. That evening, Sally arrived home around 5:30, went to shower and change, and just before 6, the doorbell rang, signaling Annie's arrival at the front door. I haven't described Annie's appearance in some time, but perhaps I should now, with a before and after perspective. Before everything unfolded a few months ago, Annie was an attractive mid-40s housewife. She had cropped, shoulder-length brown hair, a curvy figure typical of a mother, and although carrying a few extra pounds, she was still quite attractive with a well-proportioned 34C bust and an appealing rear. She was an attractive wife. Unfortunately, the woman standing before me now was almost unrecognizable. Annie had gained a significant amount of weight, developed jowls under her chin and puffy cheeks. Her stomach, which had previously had a slight mom belly, now sagged over her pants, and her once curvy posterior had expanded. Furthermore, she was dressed in loose-fitting clothes that concealed even more. Now, I have nothing against people of larger size, but that wasn't the Annie I knew. I think my surprise at her physical transformation was evident on my face, although Annie made no comment about it, merely grimacing in response. Hello, Annie. Please come in," I greeted. As we entered the kitchen, I offered her a glass of wine, which she accepted, and we engaged in small talk for a few minutes. She inquired about work and my well-being while I skipped the inquiry about her health. "It's what Paul wants. He didn't like how thin I was, so we've been working on bulking me up," she addressed the unspoken question. I frowned. For over 25 years, I had cherished this woman. Despite her actions, a lingering concern for her health remained, albeit greatly diminished. "You don't approve, do you?" She looked at me. "No, Annie, I don't. When we were together, you were a healthy size, but I'll be honest, I'm taken aback by your appearance. You don't seem well, and if I weren't so hurt by what you did, I'd be more concerned about your health and try to help," I expressed. "But you don't care, do you?" Her expression fell. "You and Sally, you're happy and healthy without me here." "Well, there's a part of me that cares, but when you walked out of here and practically left me for dead." I trailed off, shrugging while she sighed. "I deserve that. I did a terrible thing, didn't I?" "No, Mother," Sally interjected, appearing fresh from the shower. "You did a freaking horrible thing. You single-handedly tore apart a happy family, then walked out without a care in the world, and I, for one, can't understand why Dad agreed to let you come here tonight." "Sally, calm down," I intervened. "Your mother knows the situation we're in and how unhappy we all are. She requested this meeting tonight, so I thought the least we could do is be mature and hear her out." Sally wasn't pleased. As far as I could tell, like me, she hadn't spoken to her mother since that momentous day. The way my daughter was glaring at her mother, this situation wouldn't end well for anyone. It was time to steer the conversation elsewhere. Attempting a cheerful tone, I suggested, "Tough discussions aren't ideal right before dinner, so let's eat first." I served dinner, and though no one spoke, there were numerous glances exchanged across the table. Sally maintained a steady glare at her mother throughout the meal. After dinner, I cleared the table, and Annie requested to speak to Sally alone. "No way. You can say whatever you want to me with both of us present," Sally retorted firmly. I felt torn, but it was evident Sally was resolute about not being left alone with her mother. Annie seemed to sense that too. The look in her eyes mirrored what her mother had done to me on that fateful night. She acquiesced. Annie took a deep breath, hesitant to discuss matters in front of me, but she addressed Sally. "Well, Sally, I wanted to ask for your forgiveness for what happened that night. I didn't handle things properly, and despite everything, I don't want to estrange my daughter forever." Glancing at me, Annie added, "There's more, but I'd prefer to discuss it in private, without your father present." "Sorry, Mom, but if you can't say it to both of us, then I don't want to hear it," Sally declared. Before Annie could respond, Sally stood up and left the room, slamming her bedroom door shut moments later. I hoped that would go better," Annie murmured softly, more to herself than to me. "I think considering the circumstances it went rather smoothly," I replied, letting her know I understood. "Really?" Annie sounded surprised. "Yes, really," I sighed, continuing. "Annie, you need to realize that at this moment nobody in this house holds much affection for you." She started to reply, but I raised my hand, signaling her to let me finish and lay everything out. "First, you engage in a long-term carnal affair with someone, then conceal it from both Sally and me. Next, you serve me with divorce papers out of the blue. And when I enter what Sally refers to as checkout mode, you proceed to yell, scream, and then slap me." Annie appeared stunned, like a deer caught in headlights. "Yes, I remember that, and I recall most of that time until shortly after you first slapped me. But let's continue. At some point, you abandoned me when I was unresponsive, leaving me there until Sally arrived home and discovered me in the same state," I recounted. Annie's expression turned to panic. "When Sally calls you, you show no concern for me, despite your daughter being visibly distressed about her father. You never once inquire about my well-being until tonight, make unreasonable demands of my workplace, and upon entering here, it's still all about you. You asked Sally for forgiveness, yet you have not apologized to her at any point." I paused briefly, hoping my words would resonate. "Yes, Annie, with all of that considered, I think things went quite well." Annie's gaze shifted to the floor, tears welling in her eyes. They hadn't yet fallen, but they lingered threateningly. I couldn't discern whether they were for Sally, myself, or simply a reflection of her own emotions. Continuing, I stated, Now, our divorce will be finalized tomorrow, and unless you have anything further to add, I believe we have fulfilled your request for a final meeting. I walked to the door and opened it. Annie glanced at me before exiting. Once outside, she turned to look at me. Arthur, we did have some good years, didn't we? Yes, Annie, most of our time together was incredible. You were an exceptional lover, a devoted wife, and a loving mother. I'm not sure what this Paul character has done to you, but I don't see the woman I fell in love with in the person standing before me. All I see is someone who seems lost, manipulated into becoming overweight, self-centered, and caring more about what others can provide for you than the people themselves. Once again, she lowered her gaze to her feet. Tears hadn't fallen, but they were close. You truly mean that, don't you, Arthur? Yes, I do, I affirmed. She turned to leave, but hesitated, looking utterly broken this time. Arthur, about the house. Paul told me I needed to ask. So that was the purpose of her visit. It wasn't about reconnecting with her family. It was solely about money. I chuckled, leaving Annie puzzled by my reaction. Go tell your soulmate that you'll have your share of the savings and the equity from this house transferred to the bank account your lawyer provided to Rhonda by this time. Tomorrow. And Annie, she glanced at me, protect that money from Paul, or you won't have it for long. Update the next morning marked the final decree, and Annie and I were officially no longer husband and wife. There was a small twinge of sadness within me, but it was fleeting. Mostly I felt content. The past few months had been challenging for everyone. Now, at 48 years old, I felt liberated, knowing I still had much life left to live. Rhonda phoned to inform me that pizza was on her tonight at my place. During lunch at the office, Sally dropped by. We reminisced about happier times with her mother, when we were a complete family. Despite Sally's dislike for her mother, I could sense she missed the woman she once was. Truthfully, I did too. We shared many good years together. As Sally left, there seemed to be a silent exchange between her and Tina. Not long after, I was summoned to Tina's office. She closed the door and then kissed me passionately, as if the sun might never rise again. I must admit I responded in kind. Can I claim you as mine now, Arthur? Tina asked. I felt a sore spot on my neck, likely from a bruise forming where she had just kissed me moments before. I think you may have already done that. That evening's dinner was delightful, with Sally, Rhonda, Tina, and Clarice all joining in to celebrate my newfound freedom from Annie. Later that Friday night, after the girls were in bed, Tina and I consummated our relationship. I must have done something right because, throughout the weekend, Tina seemed a bit sore whenever she sat down. But her eyes burned with a fiery passion that I knew was reserved for me alone. 6 months later, we tied the knot in a beautiful ceremony by a local lake, with many of our colleagues in attendance. Though we initially planned to marry later, we decided to move the date up to coincide with the arrival of Sally and Clarice's new little brother. Update 5 years had passed, and Sally, her boyfriend Tina, and I were enjoying dinner at a local restaurant when 5-year-old Keegan posed a question. Daddy, who is that lady who keeps staring at us? Turning to look, we spotted Annie sitting across the room. She had noticeably lost weight and appeared discontent. Since the divorce, we hadn't seen or heard from her, and she hadn't attempted to contact Sally. Excusing myself from the table, I approached her. Hi, Annie. Hi, Arthur. How are you? I inquired. She glanced down at her chicken salad, replying, You were right, Arthur. You were right about him. Paul convinced me I was his soulmate and you meant nothing to him. But when I did receive the money up front, he persuaded me to gain weight because he loved me and preferred overweight women. After receiving the divorce settlement, you advised me not to give it to him, but I didn't listen. He squandered it in 6 months and then abandoned me. Though I was still upset with her, her story lacked the happy ending mine had. Since then, I've spent every moment trying to rebuild the confidence he shattered and reclaim some semblance of my former self, she confessed, holding back tears as she looked at me. After all these years, that look resembled the Annie I once knew. Arthur, I am so sorry. I treated you horribly. I did it because I believed Paul knew things you didn't. I abandoned the man who truly loved me, leaving you unresponsive, and… She paused, gripping the table's edge. You could have died because of my actions. I know you can never forgive me, but I want to apologize. Tears streamed openly down her face. Surprisingly, Sally had joined us, standing beside me, also witnessing her mother's apology. She gave me a weary smile, grabbed my hand and extended her hand to her mother. Seeing Sally and then witnessing her extending her hand, Annie panicked, attempting to leave, but Sally blocked her path. Mom, stop. You don't need to leave, Sally asserted, sliding into the booth next to Annie. Sally and I joined her. I glanced at Tina, who nodded in agreement. For the next hour, mother and daughter conversed. There were many tears shed, but for once, they were healing, not hurtful. Once they caught up, Sally and I reintroduced Annie to everyone else. Annie seemed a bit unsettled when introduced to Keegan as Auntie Annie. Following that day, we gradually welcomed Annie back into our lives. Sally and her mother reconnected slowly, meeting for coffee every week or two. Trust developed gradually between them, but eventually solidified. When Sally got married, Annie had the opportunity to play the role of mother of the bride. Tina occasionally invited Annie over for dinner at our house. Initially, I suspected it was to spite Annie for what she had lost and Tina had gained by marrying me. However, while they never became close friends, Tina and Annie developed an odd sort of friendship that I never quite understood. Rhonda never forgave Annie for the injury she inflicted on me, although she remained polite when they encountered each other. With Tina's approval, Annie and I engaged in some post-marriage counseling. We addressed many of the issues from our past spanning over 5 years ago. The counselor speculated that Annie might have been experiencing hormonal imbalances, but Annie vehemently rejected this notion. No, I threw away the most precious things in my life that day. I had a loving husband and a daughter who wanted to be with me. No hormonal imbalance can justify how I destroyed everything good in my life for someone who was nothing but trouble in bed and had an inadequate appendage, she remarked with a sweet smile directed at me. Arthur and Sally deserve better from me, she admitted tearfully, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. It took me 5 years to reconnect with them. I thank God every day that Arthur has allowed me back into his life. And Tina, too, she blushed, acknowledging Tina's warmth towards her, despite everything. She had every reason to hate me, yet she has always treated me kindly. I got lucky, losing everything I discarded, and I will bear that burden for a long time. Annie gained more from those counseling sessions than I did. It was reassuring to confirm that neither Sally nor I were responsible for Annie's decision to leave us. And she was right, Tina had lifted us up and forged a stronger family bond. They say people pay for their mistakes eventually, and Paul did. He moved to another state, and once again attempted to manipulate a married woman for her money. This time, however, the woman's husband caught Paul in the act and took matters into his own hands, rendering Paul incapable. The husband received a 10-year sentence, but if Rhonda's rumors were accurate, he might be released sooner. Tina and I are still deeply in love. I never imagined I could love anyone as much or as deeply as I did Annie, but Tina proved me wrong. She not only gave me her love, but also her soul, wholeheartedly. We continue to work together in her company, and I'm still in the same job. While we have our ups and downs, we always prioritize communication when it matters. Her physique remains remarkable, and we still make love frequently. We've even indulged in love-making moments in exotic locations while on vacation. Often, just one glance is enough to lead us to locking the bedroom door and passionately indulging in each other. Once, after we had finished making love, showered, and dressed, we entered the kitchen to find Sally and Annie engaged in conversation. We had recently learned that Sally was expecting, sparking excitement as the girls discussed the arrival of my first grandchild. My goodness, Sally, you'd think these two were teenagers with the way they behave. Tina, you'll have to let me in on your secret to keeping Arthur so lively. Maybe I can get some tips to keep Fred on his toes, Sally teased amidst laughter. I blushed. Annie had been casually dating lately, but nothing serious until Fred entered the picture. Mom, let them be. We all know that Dad has been on a mission since, Sally teased mischievously, her eyes twinkling. Annie hesitated while Sally laughed, and Tina blushed. I simply leaned back, smirked at my girls, and felt myself stirred again by Tina's presence. Eventually, I excused myself, making my way back to the bedroom, with Tina following shortly after, locking the door behind her.
Story 2.
Divorcing my cheating wife. Her life spirals downward as I rebuild myself and focus on our kids. Hi everyone, TLDR, 13 years together, 9 years married, 2 kids aged 6 and 3. Wife cheated twice with a coworker, confessed. I had no clue something was going on. I did the pick-me dance for 2 months and caught evidence of her going back for a third time one day after Father's Day. I confronted her, terminated the relationship, and lawyered up. Now we are talking agreement. My situation: I'm a freelance technician for audiovisual, TV, corporate concerts, comedy shows, fashion. My schedule is very messy. We've been separated for 1 month, and I had a hard time staying in no contact. Tonight, I broke no contact because I came back from my parents who live 300 kilometers away. I took some time with my kids. We still share the same apartment, though when she's here I go away, and she does too, except when I really can't. So, when I was unpacking my kids' things, I couldn't refrain from asking, how are things going with the affair partner? Not very smart, is it? Well, she didn't look good. She has lost a lot of weight, so did I. News on the front, the company she's working for is going bankrupt, so she's found another job somewhere else, but with €3,000 less a year in pay. She apparently is not with the affair partner anymore because he betrayed her and told a lot of people. Now, she can't work in her field because she's labeled with a bad reputation, and it's a small world. Her friends won't talk to her now, at least for a bit of time, because she hasn't been a good friend lately. She smokes 2 packs a day. Her brother won't talk to her for some time because she borrowed money for the holidays. I'm not paying anymore, except she said it was for the holidays, but she lied to him. She needed money to give me back the €2,000 she stole from a savings account I had asked her to invest in some of my parents' money. She's made a Tinder account, which is none of my business, and says now she can really be a slut. Every detail has been narrated while crying. I feel stuck in a maze. For custody, I want to make it 50-50ths, but my job is quite difficult to make that work. She wants to have full custody of the kids, with me having free visiting rights whenever I want, because according to her, she has ruined her life and wants to take care of the kids because they're all she has left. I feel like she's lost her mind. I feel that I'm going to either have to work all the time to pay for child support, or pay for someone to come home when I can't. My parents and brother are far away, and I can't ask them to come every 2 weeks, even for a day or two. I really want to raise my children. The situation is really stressful right now. I'm under anxiolytics to help me sleep and shut down my brain. I run 3 times a week, eat as healthy as I can, and have lost 14 kilograms in 3 months. I vent with friends and family. I know she's throwing self-pity at me, and she doesn't even want the relationship back, and I wouldn't either. But this is hard. I'm scared for the kids. I know she's a good mom because she has been so far, even though we have different views on education. I feel stuck in a loop. The amount of stress is overwhelming. Thanks for any advice. Ask for advice and you're going to get some. First up, you're still thinking of her as your wife and partner, which is why you're having a hard time making the right decision. You should not give a hoot about her emotional, manipulative nonsense. Consult with your lawyer and reach out to friends and family so that you can get a more objective perspective on what would be the proper course of action for you and your kids. Her issues are for her to deal with at this point, not your circus, not your monkeys. I know it's hard because one can't just turn off their feelings for a person who once had an important role in their life. But the marriage is over, and she did a lot of damage to cause that ending. As such, now you must establish proper boundaries and prioritize your interests and what's best for your kids. She sounds like she's not remotely stable enough to even be considered for 50-50ths custody, much less full custody. She's clearly out of her mind. A good mom doesn't smoke 2 packs a day around her children. She's spiraling. Tell her she can be better than this. Have her start walking a lot, see a doctor for a checkup, and save herself from self-destruction. It's in your best interest to help her for the sake of your kids. Isn't it better to divorce her when she has a job? Maybe tell the attorney to pause the process for now. Tell her, get your life and health on track and I'll divorce you as soon as possible. Nothing says coping like 2 packs a day. The level of commitment to self-destruction here is truly commendable. 2 packs a day, that's dedication. And isn't it delightful how she's managed to alienate not only her husband, but also her friends with her impressive display of poor decision-making skills? And the no-contact rule? A move as timeless as it is ineffective. It's like trying to resist the allure of a freshly baked pie cooling on the windowsill. You know you shouldn't, but temptation gets the best of you. But as the comments say, let go of the illusion of partnership, OP, and embrace the clarity of independence. After all, why waste precious brain cells deciphering her manipulative nonsense when you could be planning your glorious escape from the circus of her making? Update: today she's gone with our kids for her week of holidays. D-Day 1 was April 24th when she confessed to the affair. I did the pick-me dance and tried to fix things. D-Day 2 was June 21st when she cheated again, and I discovered it. I asked for a divorce, married for 9 years, 2 kids aged 6 and 3, and an apartment we can't sell for another 1.5 years. 1 month separated. We alternate staying in the apartment and can't do much before the divorce is official. Today hurts like hell. I'm 37, male, left alone in our apartment, and she's 35, female, gone on her week of holidays. We were supposed to go together this time of year. Summer holidays, riding bikes, going to the beach, playing with the kids. I feel devastated, and it feels so unreal. I went to my individual counselor, did some paperwork, and went for a walk. Tonight, I'll be eating with a friend at a restaurant, and I tried to fill my weekend agenda, but I have too much time alone. Everyone is on vacation. On Monday, I'm going to my parents in Normandy. I feel like I'm regressing into a child who wants to cry to his mom, but I'm looking forward to it. It hurts, it really does. I've got so much cognitive dissonance right now that I've even considered, what if she wants me back? We texted yesterday, I know I shouldn't. She's not with the affair partner anymore. He played her. She's terrified of going alone for a week with our kids in a mobile home in the south of France. But I guess these are the consequences. I have the second week with my kids, and thank God my parents and niece will be with me. I can't wrap my head around what's going on. I mean, I fully understand what's at play here, but I'm doing what's recommended. Chump Lady's book, her blog, individual counseling, exercise, healthy eating, surrounding myself with love from friends and family, and talking openly about it. I cry, though I haven't journaled yet, but I will. I feel like I've told the story a million times, and yet it's still not understandable. I try to call my friends and family whenever I feel despair. Sometimes I don't even know what to say, I just don't want to be alone. I had everything. We had everything. I went through my hate and anger phase at the beginning, but now it's just sadness, despair, a void. The good news is, I still managed to get up, wash, shave, take care of my kids, put on some perfume, dress nicely, and work. But I have no dreams, no purpose apart from my kids. I'm a sound engineer in audiovisual, passionate about music, a drummer. I play guitar, bass, and I love cinema, series, concerts, and people. I have no connection to any of these things at the moment. I have zero libido, which is cruel because I'm the kind who likes to eat, sleep, enjoy good times, and have sex. What's left to epicure right now? I can still joke a bit. I don't know why I'm writing this. I'm tired and lost. I will get through this, but wow, I've never been hurt like this in my entire life. Your ex-wife's off gallivanting on holiday while you're left to wrestle with the ghosts of marital bliss past in your oh-so-empty apartment. The joys of separation. But hey, at least you're ticking all the boxes of post-breakup self-care, therapy, exercise, healthy eating, and crying on cue. And let's not forget the obligatory spiral into what-if territory, because nothing says progress like revisiting the same mental hamster wheel over and over again, right? Just keep on trucking, keep on grooving, and remember, the only way out is through. Update. Hi everyone, I've been posting 2 to 3 times here, and I appreciate all the advice I've been given. Tonight, I feel like writing to the community to share. It's also therapeutic. French person here, 37, male, betrayed by a 35, female. 2 kids, 3 and 6 years old. Divorce is ongoing. You can read my previous posts for more details. I'm returning from holidays with my kids tomorrow, and I'm dreading coming home and having to see her face after 2 weeks, as we share the same apartment for now. I should use the following for stand-up comedy. This week, I had an absurd phone call with her about her cat. She left for the first week of holidays with our kids. I didn't want to be alone and went to my parents in Normandy. Our neighbor fed the cat while we were away. I managed with the neighbor when I left, but she didn't when she came back. I don't know her holiday schedule, so she got woken up by the neighbor at 10 a.m. entering the apartment. This makes me smile, and somehow it's my fault. So, she took advantage of this to blame shift again about the end of our marriage. The charm-pity-rage cycle is spot on. She's convinced herself that I'm spying on her phone, rolling my eyes. A friend of mine who checks on me regularly told me, she's your best therapist, and he's not wrong. I've made progress because I could hear all the blame shifting, and it didn't guilt me. I was able to just reply, I know my wrongs in the relationship. I'm not sure you know yours, and anyway, it doesn't justify what you've put me through. When she insisted, I just hung up on her. But it made me think of all the things I did for her and for us as a family. When we started dating, I was in a do-it-yourself punk band, touring Europe and mostly the UK. I had no money. Her parents are divorced but wealthy on both sides. She's Jewish, I'm not. I was raised Catholic turned agnostic. I was never accepted by her parents because, in their eyes, middle-class punk rocker isn't a career, and I'm not Jewish. But for 13 years I sat at every Seder, every Pa, every Hanukkah. I gave my children her name, and I also took her name for various reasons. I agreed to circumcise my son. I took crap behind my back, and she never had my back in front of them, or when I wasn't there. But still, I showed up for her at first, and for the kids after. Oh, and when the kids came into our lives, her parents didn't like me standing my ground about education. On her mother's side, I felt judged all the time. Her stepfather is a nightmare. He judged me and maybe pushed me into depression while I was reconverting into a sound engineer because I wasn't following the career path he had in mind for me. I spent 2 months working in the apartment we bought together with my father. taking down walls, redesigning the place, and decorating it. She hasn't even hung one picture frame on any wall. I always had intentions for her. Often I'd buy her small things, nothing big. Maybe a cookie on the way home, or a book I thought she'd love. On Fridays when I wasn't working, I'd go to the next city's Jewish bakery to buy challah and traditional Jewish meals so we could do Shabbat as a family. I never wanted to convert, I'm just very interested in and curious about traditions and religions. When I did all those things, it felt normal, like I did them without expecting anything in return. I know what you might think codependency. I don't know. Is that what it was? I didn't feel codependent, as I kept playing in bands far less since having kids and had a life of my own. Too many red flags. I wanted to feel accepted by her family, that's for sure. It felt like I was these last 2 to 3 years, but deep down I know I never would have been. I just loved her for 13 years, even through the ups and downs. So tonight, I didn't want to vent but to write down my story. For myself, for anyone who cares, and not to point out what I did wrong, but more everything I did right. I try to focus on this. My mother told me while I was crying, she doesn't deserve you. Hell no, she doesn't deserve me. Thanks for reading. The classic tale of ignoring red flags like they're mere suggestions instead of glaring warnings. It's like driving straight into a tornado while whistling a happy tune, pretending the storm clouds aren't looming overhead. But who has time to notice warning signs when you're busy playing the role of supportive partner, right? From awkward family dinners to judgmental in-laws, you've weathered more storms than a seasoned sailor on the high seas. And let's not forget the delightful stepfather who moonlights as a professional joy killer, because nothing says welcome to the family like a healthy dose of judgment and passive-aggressive commentary. You may have been blinded by love for 13 long years, but even the most resilient rose-colored glasses can't hide the truth forever. Here's to acknowledging your own worth and realizing that sometimes the hardest battles are the ones we fight within ourselves. Update, as the title says, I found a place to live. It has enough space for me and my kids. It's not near the schools, but it's manageable. I'm looking forward to it, but I'm also torn. I have a few days ahead of me to pack things and get the F out of here. Moving next Sunday. It's heart-wrenching to pack. I cried uncontrollably 3 times today. No contact was dang hard, as we've been living in the same apartment, taking turns, but we met. There was one day where she was sad, called me, said she's sorry, etc. She wasn't with the affair partner anymore, so I got to experience the false remorse again. Then, 3 days after, she asked if she could hold me in her arms. She said if I wanted to F her for my own pleasure, I could. Can't even take care of myself, so that helped. What the F? It was so hard to walk out after hearing all this, but I did, of course. I'm proud of myself for reaching out to friends and family, keeping my head fairly straight, with ups and downs, of course. Staying away from alcohol and other things, and taking care of my kids. Even though that part is hard, I know how to take care of them. I always have. I had some time alone with them prior to this, but it's hard to do it knowing that this is my new reality, and it will be forever like this. While heartbroken, I'm keeping my exercise and healthy eating routine. I've lost 17 kilograms now. I need to reinforce those butt cheeks because I've lost weight fast. Listening to podcasts helped, and I managed to watch Ted Lasso without her 2 days ago, and I spent 3 hours not thinking too much about all of this. But I'm struggling with no contact. I know, it's poison. Why the F do I keep talking to her sometimes? I had to call my cousin one night after her sadness. I was quite back in the bargaining stage, and I knew it, and it didn't help. I asked him, dude, she's coming tonight. I need you to slap my face, bring me back to reality, and keep me from talking to her. She's such a devil in disguise. Elvis Presley's voice, my mind still cannot process this. I'm just not there yet. Anyway, I'm moving. This will help. I'm overwhelmed by how much crap I have to do because I know she won't. Changing contracts for electricity, internet. I have to deal with both my new apartment and the old one, while packing and taking care of the kids in the mornings and evenings next week. Let's take a moment to appreciate the absurdity of trying to maintain no contact while sharing an apartment. It's like trying to avoid stepping on Lego pieces in a room filled with nothing but Lego pieces. Talk about a Herculean task. And then there's the tempting offers of physical reconciliation. Moving out of the lion's den and into your own den of solitude sounds like a recipe for adventure, doesn't it? Update. Hi everyone. Out of the blue, I just want to share my progress. I'm sorry I can't do short posts, as writing here is therapeutic. You can read my post history, but in the end, it's just a typical chump story. I'm not minimizing it, it's just that I feel better about it now. This sub has been such a great help. I'm very thankful for this community. I'm thankful for the people who take the time to give advice, the people who reach out to share their stories, so we don't feel alone in this. From the first time I posted here, I deleted my post because I wasn't ready to hear the truth. After D-Day 2, that changed. I'm roughly 6 months post D-Day 1, 4 months post D-Day 2, and my morale has improved so much day and night. I moved out of the apartment we bought. She stayed. It was part of an agreement that suited me. I was very bitter about moving out, having been chumped and all, but it was the best thing that could happen to me. After my second visit of apartments near France, I'm freelance, I was desperate. Crappy places, too small or so expensive, no room for my kids. Then I took a shot at another one, not very convinced, and I found exactly the right spot. It's a place to retreat, a place to heal. It's quiet, not so expensive, and I have a decent room for my kids, and they are happy. I'm starting to enjoy being the captain of my own ship. I cook whatever I want. I take time to cook proper meals most of the time. Just cook myself a nice green curry chicken and vegetables. My relationship with my kids has improved. I get to be the good cop for once. When I'm working, I don't feel guilty for not being home, and I take time to grab a beer with my colleagues. I keep doing my exercise routine and feeling good about my body for the first time in 20 years. We co-parent. Okay? I impose and respect my boundaries with her now. She called last week at 10:30 p.m. to talk about the kids. I politely told her never to call me at this hour unless it's an emergency. I'm home, not thinking about her. I've had ups and downs, but I feel the downs are less frequent. I don't think too much about the affair anymore. It pops up sometimes, but it's very, very manageable. I've used every means of getting better, took every advice. Therapy, friends, family, exercise, journaling, getting the feelings out, getting up in the mornings, going to work, focusing. I've read the books, listened to the podcasts, and talked about it openly to anyone in my first, second, and sometimes third circle who's interested in knowing the details of what happened. They've all been very helpful. I'm still doing a lot of it, but now I can also spend time not talking about it. I'm starting to enjoy life again. Next step is getting back to playing music in a band. I'm off Xanax since 4 weeks ago, and I sleep very well. I'm not there yet, of course, but man, do I feel relieved. Relieved that the light at the end of the tunnel people talk about in this sub is getting brighter and brighter. Relieved that the pain has deflated. I cracked open my head last week and ended up in the hospital, nothing really serious. I just walked into a tow truck parked on the side of the road. I wasn't looking up. The pain was brutal. It bled a lot, and the people took care of me. They stitched me up. I got home and cried a lot that day, never felt so alone. The wound was fresh. Day after day, it got better, and today, it just itches. I know there will be a day when what happened these last few months will be a scar. Today, it still itches very much, but when that day comes, I'll look at it and be thankful to the people who got me through this. I'm proud of myself, stronger for it. I drove myself to the hospital and the nurse took care of me. This is what people do here, and what friends and family are. 4. Reach out. Thanks for reading. Final update. Hi everyone. I haven't posted in a while and I wanted to share an update on my situation and bring some positivity. In my last post, I mentioned how much better I felt. Things have improved more and more over time. Looking back at those dark times, it's crazy how well I feel now. I ran the half marathon in Paris and finished 7 minutes earlier than expected. A lot of emotion that day, thank you, cheater. Got my social life back, thank you, cheater. Starting new music projects, thank you, cheater. I don't have to deal with my in-laws and put on a happy face, thank you, cheater. Met a cool woman, independent, sane, mature, still in the early stages, but it feels great. Only green flags so far, no drama, thank you, cheater. Therapy has been tremendously helpful. We don't really talk about the D-Day anymore. Now we're focusing on me, and it feels good to realize that the affair didn't define me. I haven't developed trust issues, thanks to therapy and the people around me. Still no contact with the ex. Last time I saw her was at my kid's first therapy session. I can see she's putting on an I'm okay mask. She cries every time I bring up an issue regarding the divorce though. She can't manage money. She actually has to work now at her new job, and the boss isn't her father-in-law, so the work schedule is heavier. She doesn't get to see much of the kids because of the hours at the office. I'm sure she still sees the affair partner or other people, but I know her. She rug sweeps a lot. I'm not really interested in karma anymore because I'm so happy with my life now that I don't give a crap. But I know it'll backlash at some point. I just hope the kids won't be too affected when it happens. In 1 month, I'll be officially divorced and I'm looking forward to it. I finally feel like I'm out of the tunnel. No more crying over my old life or her. I don't miss her, I just feel sorry for my kids because it's been hard on them. Anyway, thanks for reading, and for everyone in the early stages of grief, shock, and the crap storm, put in the work. Take your time to grieve, feel everything, and it will be okay. From running marathons to dodging emotional landmines, you've truly mastered the art of turning tragedy into triumph. Who knew a cheating ex could be the catalyst for a whole new lease on life? Talk about silver linings in the cloud of marital betrayal. Here's to scars that itch and wounds that heal, both literal and metaphorical. Because in the end, it's not about the pain we endure, but the strength we gain from overcoming it. Keep on running, keep on thriving, and remember, when life throws tow trucks your way, just duck and weave like a champ. Cheers to that! OP, what do you think? Have you ever been in the same boat? Share your experiences in the comments below, and thank you for joining us today.
Story 3.
This literally occurred this morning. I'm sharing it here in the hope of venting and gaining some perspective because I've been extremely upset all day and unable to process this rationally. My wife is currently 8 months pregnant with our child, and we live next to another married couple in their late 30s. I've never been a fan of the guy next door. I've always found him to be invasive, and his overly friendly demeanor often seems like he's prying and overly clingy. I'm not sure if my feelings about him are influencing my judgment in this situation, or if this incident simply confirms my suspicions. I left for work as usual, but then decided on the way there that I wasn't in the right mindset, so I called off work. I made a pit stop for breakfast and then headed home to surprise my wife. It took me about 40 minutes in total. When I arrived home, I entered through the back door and was greeted by an unexpected sight. My wife and our neighbor sitting on our living room couch. She was facing him, fully clothed, but with her shirt pulled up to expose her very pregnant stomach. He was facing her, using both hands to rub lotion on her stomach. They both froze in the moment, and my wife asked why I was back so soon. She explained that our neighbor had stopped by to borrow a toolbox while she was applying lotion to her skin, and had asked if he could feel the baby, to which she had agreed. I immediately told him to leave before I physically removed him, and he promptly exited. I tried to maintain my composure and talk to my wife to get the whole story. She claimed that our neighbor's wife is infertile, news to me considering he's never stopped complaining about his personal problems, and he simply wanted to feel the baby. That's her version of events, and she's sticking to it. However, I'm not satisfied with this explanation. In my view, there's a significant difference between allowing someone to feel the baby for a brief moment and inviting them into our home to rub lotion on her stomach. If it had been a close friend of ours, I might have understood, but I've never liked this guy, and my wife has never shown any particular closeness to him beyond polite greetings. She's not the type to let just anyone touch her. It's also rather convenient that he showed up so early, right after I left for work, shortly after his own wife had also gone to work. Furthermore, he's never asked to borrow anything from me before, so it strikes me as odd that he urgently needed a toolbox around 9:30 in the morning. I have doubts about my wife's story. This is the first time my trust in her has wavered. Her explanation just doesn't add up. When I mentioned that I might inform his wife about the incident, she strongly discouraged me, suggesting I shouldn't blow it out of proportion. If it was innocent, why should it be blown out of proportion? Even if there's nothing more to it, I'm not comfortable with what I witnessed. I'm not okay with him touching my unborn child in our home without me present. I understand it's her body and her choice, but I'm not okay with this situation. Feeling the baby kick would be one thing, but he was casually sitting on our sofa, applying lotion to her stomach while they engaged in a private conversation. I'm struggling to find a way to convey my disbelief without causing stress that could be harmful to her or our baby. I don't want to start a fight during this stage of her pregnancy, but my mind is racing and I'm unsettled by what transpired. Any advice would be welcome. Update. I'm providing this single update in response to the overwhelming support and numerous requests to do so. I didn't anticipate such a response, and I've seen references to my situation on other subreddits, so I feel compelled to address it. Many of you were correct. Congratulations. After reading through all your responses, talking to friends, and reflecting for a day, my wife maintained her story, apologized for making me uncomfortable, and assured me it wouldn't happen again. Bob, our neighbor, also left a handwritten note in the mailbox, specifically apologizing. However, I still didn't feel at ease, and the consensus was that I should talk to my neighbor's wife, whom we'll call Sally. So, that's exactly what I did. I waited for my neighbor to leave for work, then called my mother-in-law to take my wife out for lunch and a girls' outing, giving her a chance to get away from the house. I left for work as usual, but then called off again and stayed with a friend. Around noon, I received a text from my wife, informing me that she was with her mother-in-law and would be back by dinner time. When I returned home, I went to Sally's door and knocked. Bob decided to inform Sally that I had kicked him out and made a scene, stating that I didn't want either of them to speak to us anymore because I was angry about his assistance to my wife. To my surprise, I discovered that both Sally and Bob had been visiting my house while I was occupied elsewhere for the past few weeks. My wife had approached Sally and Bob, asking if they could help with chores she couldn't manage alone due to her pregnancy. Sometimes Sally assisted with small tasks, or simply spent time there, sometimes both, and at times just Bob. My wife told Sally that I was aware of it and was fine with their help, which is why she was baffled by her husband's false claims of my anger. Sally showed me the text she sent to my wife. She had her number, not mine, seeking clarification about whether she was still welcome over, but my wife hadn't responded. Since I don't interact with Sally and Bob frequently, she assumed her husband was telling the truth. Sally also confessed that she noticed my wife and Bob becoming close friends, attributing it to the pregnancy, and dismissed it as his way of coping with their infertility. I described what I had witnessed to her, including the tool incident, which turned out to be untrue. We both reached the same conclusions. We both shed tears, shared a hug for the first time, and alternated between denying and accepting the situation while trying to calm each other down. We took a walk around the block together and devised a plan. She intended to call Bob at work and inform him that my wife had messaged her, confessing to an affair between the two of them to see how he reacted. I returned to my friend's place and began experiencing severe panic attacks, fearing I had made a terrible mistake, ruined my marriage, and worried that I might be wrong. A little later, I received a call from my wife, yelling at me to find a way to leave work and come home, so I hurried home. Bob had called her and told her what Sally had informed him. She accused me of being crazy and a terrible person, even considering leaving me. I was in the midst of a panic attack, thinking I had destroyed my life over nothing, while also trying to calm her down for the sake of our baby. On impulse, I told her that if she was leaving, I would still request a DNA test. That's when everything changed. Her entire demeanor shifted to pleading, begging, apologizing, hyperventilating, and holding me. She asked me how I had found out while denying that anything had happened. I reassured her and asked if she would talk to me if we went for a drive. She agreed. I drove us to a parking lot and we talked. I told her that if there was any chance of anything happening, she needed to tell me what had transpired because I already knew quite a bit. She confessed that Bob had made advances a few times before she became pregnant. There was uncertainty about the paternity of our baby. Bob had occasionally visited and acted as a dad on rare occasions, just in case it's his. They hadn't been intimate for months. She suggested we could move away, emphasized that the baby was ours no matter what, and claimed that Bob had manipulated her. She admitted lying to Sally to justify Bob's visits for daddy duties. I asked her if she would stay with her mother-in-law for a few days while I calmed down, and she agreed. I took her home, helped her pack, and dropped her off. I've packed up my essential belongings and am staying in a friend's basement. My friend spoke to my wife on my behalf, telling her that if the baby is mine, I'll take responsibility, but if it isn't, it's her concern. In any case, I'll be filing for divorce. My friends took my phone and removed my presence from social media. She has been attempting to reach out to my friends, but they have told her to stay away. I talked to my boss, who has been understanding. The last update I received from Sally was that Bob hadn't returned home and wasn't responding to her calls and texts. I feel like I've lost everything. In less than a week, my life has completely fallen apart. The only thing keeping me going is the slim chance that the baby is mine. I have nothing else. I woke up today feeling disappointed that I woke up at all. I've never felt so isolated, and I haven't come to terms with any of it yet. I'm praying for the first time in my life, hoping to stop feeling this way and find the strength to move forward. Final update. I'm not sure if anyone will recall my initial posts, as they were removed, and I haven't received an explanation despite messaging the mod team. I'm uncertain if this update will be deleted as well. If anyone wishes, they can use removed it to access the posts if they aren't visible on my profile. I continue to receive messages regularly requesting an update, so this will be my final one. In a condensed version of my very lengthy story, a week after my previous update, my soon-to-be ex-wife gave birth to our child, and I was present at the hospital. I am indeed the father. The weeks following my last update were extremely challenging, with drama added by both sides of our families and friends. Fortunately, I've received immense support from the majority of people in my life, as well as from all of you. My wife and I decided to sit down and discuss matters after her discharge, in my friend's basement with my friend nearby in case I needed support. She came over, and we expressed everything we needed to say. I vented and said many hurtful things, some of which I regret. She spent the entire time apologizing and pleading for me to take her back, hoping to give our family a chance to endure everything that transpired. This continued for about an hour, until I realized there was nothing more to be said, and I no longer felt any romantic love for her. She acknowledged that our marriage was over, and we agreed to prioritize our daughter above all else. We planned to work out a custody arrangement amicably and eventually become more active co-parents once our wounds heal. She has the potential to be a great mother, but she failed as a wife. My sole focus now is to get myself in the right mental state to be the best father possible. We also intend to sell our home eventually, but for now, I'm staying in an apartment. Sally is ending her relationship with Bob. He's currently residing with his mother and continues to avoid direct communication with Sally. She mentioned that the last message she received from him conveyed his understanding of his actions, an apology for hurting her, an expression of love, and a willingness to accept a divorce without contesting it. Sally is finding it challenging to cope with everything and lacks a support system. As a result, we are forming a friendship, primarily two individuals who have been hurt leaning on each other for support. She also intends to begin therapy. Just to clarify, I have no intentions of having anything beyond a platonic friendship with Sally. She's a wonderful person, but that's the extent of it. I still haven't fully come to terms with my new role as a parent. Mentally, I had already prepared myself for the possibility that the child might not be mine. I plan to attend parenting classes and spend more time bonding with my daughter during her early years. It's a daunting prospect, but I am genuinely happy. I understand there's a lot of work ahead and more emotional healing to do, but I am in a stable place and I am a father. That's what matters most. Third story. My wife and I have been married for 6 years. We met soon after our previous marriages ended and quickly fell in love. It's been fantastic. We have our disagreements like any couple, but we've had a wonderful life together, and for the first time, I felt genuinely loved. Then, 3 weeks ago, I discovered she cheated on me. Some context. I've been dealing with anxiety and depression. In the last 6 months, I noticed something wasn't right, and at my wife's urging, I sought help from a new doctor to explore different medications. Her daughter also deals with anxiety and depression, so my wife manages a lot. I understand it's tough, but she mentioned that it had become increasingly challenging for her to cope with my depression in recent months. I didn't feel like going out or doing much, and I probably wasn't the most enjoyable person to be around. I admit I didn't put in as much effort as I should have to improve my mental health until it seemed too late. My wife has a group of friends she attends rock concerts with, which isn't my scene, so I'm fine with her going without me. It's her time with friends, and I get some time to myself. I prefer being at home. But one of the guys in her group is the person she cheated on me with. She claimed they had been good friends for 3 years, and only in the month before she cheated did she start flirting with him. She chose to spend a weekend alone by the lake to clear her head, claiming it was tough living in a home with constantly negative vibes. That weekend away was when she cheated. I should have seen it coming. She dislikes being alone, so her idea of a solitary weekend should have been a warning sign. When I found out, my mind was made up. We need a divorce. Collect your things and leave. I want no part of you. For the first couple of days, I was hurt, angry, and resolute about starting afresh. My wife pleaded for me to come back. She said marriages can withstand this. She doesn't understand why she did it, and she wants to reconcile. I wasn't convinced. But as the initial shock faded, I reflected on how these 6 years have been the best. This was unlike her. She was the last person I'd imagined would cheat on me. Until recently, she was an incredibly loving and caring wife. So I reached out, about 5 days after discovering the truth. She came over, and I expressed my wish to work things out. I wanted her to return home to see if we could salvage our relationship. But she said she didn't want to. She explains there's something clearly wrong for her to act this way, something wrong with the marriage and something off in her mind. She mentioned lining up an apartment and planning to move out, uncertain if we can salvage things. So, I ask her if it's because she's still in touch with the friend she had an affair with. She clarified she's not leaving me for him, but she does have feelings for him, making it impossible for her to focus on us as long as those emotions linger. That's where I stand, heartbroken, feeling hit twice. I learned from a mutual friend yesterday that the friend she's been talking to has stopped flirting, reduced communication, and she's disappointed. It seems like a midlife crisis, seeking attention and serotonin while we're apart. I'm approaching 7 weeks since the D-Day, and the pain persists. With the guidance of a friend, I realized I'm codependent on my wife. My happiness relied entirely on her. She was my whole world. When she left, I felt like I had lost everything. Every day, I'm striving to make myself stronger. Acknowledging my codependency issues, I'm actively working on becoming more self-reliant. Currently, I wouldn't be good for anyone, as I'd likely cling to a new partner, setting myself up for more pain. For those aiming to reconcile, it's essential to introspect deeply first. Understand why you truly desire reconciliation. Great memories and a happy marriage are valid reasons to attempt overcoming betrayal, but ensure it's not solely because your spouse was your entire emotional support. We all need to stand independently emotionally. That's my lesson. I'm unsure how my story will conclude. I'm not even entirely certain I still want to reconcile. I've initiated no contact with my wife to focus on what's most important. Me. Update. Approaching 11 weeks post. D-Day, I'm about to sit down with my wife and compel her to decide. I don't desire divorce, but she's left me with no alternative. I can't continue living like this. From the start, I sensed she wanted to explore dating and freedom while keeping me as a backup plan. After a conversation where she shared details about her dating life, it became apparent. She deliberately hurt me, making it clear she was pushing me away. The following morning, I realized it's over. I can't have our marriage hanging in uncertainty while she seeks a replacement. To me, this isn't about working things out. She mentioned missing what we had while dating, but I strongly disagree. I can't tolerate this any longer. I wish to end it outright, but my therapist suggests confronting her with a choice. I'll ask her to halt communication with other men and try to mend our marriage, or she's choosing divorce. This approach prevents her from playing the victim, as she has a say in this. I don't want a divorce, but I refuse to live in this manner. She's shown no interest in reconciling over the past few weeks. Instead, she's sought my help for things she could have asked the guy she's dating. I'm furious and deeply hurt. I'd say there's less than a 1% chance she wants to reconcile. I expect a struggle where she avoids mentioning divorce to sidestep being seen as the villain. She'll likely argue that I haven't given her enough time and that I'm pushing too hard for us to reconcile. Nearly 3 months is ample time to decide whether to stay in a marriage. This turmoil began after my wife spent a weekend with another guy. Despite my willingness to reconcile, she chose to live independently. Despite enduring 2 major blows, I hoped for a positive resolution. Not all stories have a happy ending, it seems. I hope the excitement of dating again is worth sacrificing our marriage. Update. After 11 weeks of coping with my WS's indecision, I finally gave her an ultimatum between the guys she was dating during her newfound freedom or our marriage. She chose the guys. Days later, she claims to have second thoughts. After a week of on and off discussions about reconciliation, I grew tired of the back and forth, and once again, asked her to choose between me and the dating life. For the second time in 11 days, she opted for her freedom. I'm fully aware I was foolish to believe she'd genuinely want to fix things. I let my codependency influence me for 3 months, but it's truly over now. I'm restarting the divorce process and removing her from my life. The hardest part for me right now is grappling with the harsh reality of a failed marriage and being rejected by the woman I love, twice. How did you manage to get past the thought of your WS with someone else? She considers this guy her boyfriend, and he'll be at her family Thanksgiving. It's the same family that used to spend Christmas Eve at our home. Now they'll be with him. I'm absolutely certain I'm making the right choice. There's no doubt. But the pain of being betrayed and her essentially choosing this guy over me, it's excruciating. I don't know how to get through this. Yesterday marked the final hearing for our divorce, precisely 5 months from when I discovered her infidelity. As we left the lawyer's office, she hugged me and wished me happiness. I echo that sentiment. We parted ways for the last time, both with tears in our eyes. She was the one person I was certain I'd spend my life with. That didn't happen. So, while this is a new beginning, an opportunity to find someone who will treat me and my daughter as we deserve, it's a somber time. The pain of her actions won't fade quickly. Rebuilding trust will be the most challenging. She took more from me than she realizes. Cheating is the cruelest way to convey not loving someone anymore. I observed John walking into the bar and greeted him with a grin. Despite the early hour and the almost empty bar, I hoped John would join me. It had been a while since we hung out, as John was busy with something in his life and couldn't make time. Worried, I tried calling and emailing, but I couldn't reach John. I even attempted to visit John's home and office, but he was never there. I hoped his issues were resolved, but the anger on his face indicated otherwise. I stood up to shake hands but was suddenly knocked to the ground by a strong punch from John to the jaw. My head hit a nearby table as I fell. I muttered a shocked exclamation and spat out a bloody tooth. John stood over me, ready to hit again. He accused me, saying I knew and that my wife and I were laughing at him, bet that we enjoyed how trusting he was. My swollen jaw and the likely concussion made it hard for me to concentrate. I couldn't make sense of John's words. The only word I could say was, "What?" He continued to strike my ribs and legs. John shouted about my wife and me helping Amanda cheat. Bar patrons intervened, grabbing John and pulling him back. I, stunned and puzzled, looked on. The bartender called the police, and luckily, a patrol car was nearby. The ambulance took longer to arrive. While John was detained, I, helped by strangers, was assessed and placed on a gurney for transport to the emergency room. I lost consciousness before the ambulance even left, drowned out by the siren. To me, it felt like a short, bad dream. When I woke up, I realized I was in a hospital. It wasn't a nightmare. It was real. As I regained consciousness, Emily, my wife, entered with tears. She expressed her apologies and explained that she had left briefly to call my parents. I sat up a little and tried to gather my thoughts when Emily sat down and took my hand. Sleep and medication reduced the swelling, making my words more understandable. I recounted how I didn't know what happened, how I'd never seen him like this before. He said something about Amanda cheating and us causing it. His words made no sense. Emily's tears continued to fall as I spoke. Maybe I heard wrong, but he seemed to think we were making these trips so Amanda could cheat on him. This is crazy. Why would he think of something so crazy? I fell silent, looking at Emily. Lowering her head, she whispered an apology. I didn't understand why she was apologizing. He hit me, thinking we were helping her cheat. It sounded stupid. Why would he think we'd do something so bad? What kind of terrible people could do this to someone they care about? I looked at Emily as she raised her head. Something was off in her behavior. Maybe I was out of my mind, but her actions were suspicious since she was usually vocal about her opinions, especially about relationships with close friends. She might have been shocked because it wasn't what she expected. As I was about to ask her what was going on, the doctor came in and said my jaw was bruised, not broken. If I didn't have a headache, I could leave with Emily tonight. My head hurt, but something was clearly wrong with Emily, so I lied to the doctor that I felt fine to leave. Time passed. Nurses worked diligently with documents, denying me the chance to ask Emily. They were silent on the drive home. As Emily drove, we didn't even turn on music. We were silent the whole way. I needed answers, but by the time I got home, I was exhausted and just wanted to sleep. After changing clothes, I fell asleep. Emily curled up next to me, hugging tightly. After my shower, I joined Emily in the kitchen. Still in pain, but with a clearer head, I saw Emily deep in thought. Finally realizing I was there, she asked, "How are you feeling now?" "Okay, but I have a small Hitachi, and everything hurts. I just need a day of rest, and I'll be fine." I still can't figure out why John went so crazy. I took a sip and continued. Did Amanda say anything to you? Have you talked to her since yesterday to find out what happened to him? I chatted with her a bit yesterday, and she was as shocked as I was about what he did to you. I looked at my wife while she spoke. Her response seemed measured, but there was something more. She appeared sad, which was unusual given her typically upbeat personality. She seemed reserved. I thought maybe the attack had shaken her more than I initially thought. I reached out, taking her hands in mine. It's okay, honey. I'm fine. I've come to my senses. Soon, my shirt was wet from her tears. We hugged with the words, I love you. Holding each other tightly, we both called into work and spent the entire day at home. Something besides physical pain bothered me. None of it made any sense. John's sudden attack, accusing us of helping Amanda cheat. Emily's sudden change to being timid. Her vague answers to basic questions. I wanted to press her about her conversation with Amanda, but Emily was on the verge of tears. I thought now was not the best time for a confrontation. Despite both staying home, we seemed distant. I sat in the backyard, watching the wind move the trees and grass, thinking I needed to understand why John attacked me. We had been friends for a long time, and I had never seen John lose his temper without a good reason. I thought about my wife's words and couldn't recall her ever saying that John's wife hadn't cheated and had only apologized for the attack on me. We needed to hear John's side of the story, and the best way was from John himself. Although there was a risk he might attack again, it seemed like the most direct way to understand what happened. I would then talk with Emily about our roles and what made John think we were betraying him. Emily informed me that she planned to briefly stop by work to pick up her laptop, as she would be home for the week and didn't want to fall behind. After she left, I decided to visit John. On the way, I tried to call him but couldn't reach him. I hoped John was out of prison, so I took a taxi to his house. If we were lucky, we could figure out what caused the mess and get back to normal. Upon reaching John's entrance, my stomach dropped when I saw Emily's car. Instead of ringing the doorbell, I walked to the back until I heard Emily talking to Amanda. Emily was no longer silent. She was furious. John had overheard her talking about setting up a date and having my back, a conversation not meant for him. This explained why he attacked me. According to Emily, John heard her say that she'd cover for her, and Tom and John would be busy, so she could go out without arousing John's suspicions. It seemed John took it to mean that I knew what was going on. Emily claimed she would have warned me if she knew. It wasn't until I was attacked that she realized John knew. He used his phone call to express his hatred towards her, choosing to rot in prison rather than live with her. Emily wanted to sympathize, but it was Amanda who left John. Emily's support for Amanda caused serious problems in her marriage, and things could worsen when I found out. She knew it was wrong, but hoped for a short fling. Instead, Emily's support led to the worst. Now she must deal with the consequences because of Amanda, who couldn't keep her actions in check. I expressed my concerns to Emily about my marriage being in serious trouble once I found out. She tried to reassure me, stating that I never cheated, and if needed, she would tell me that. I couldn't see her, but I could tell from her voice that she closed her eyes and rubbed her forehead as she spoke. Despite Emily's attempt to reassure me, I argued that I had lied to her, helped her scam my best friend, and as a result, he attacked me. I doubted that I could make her believe anything I told her, especially given her role in the situation. Emily insisted that I didn't do anything wrong and that I should know this. Frustrated, I told her that it didn't matter, and I had no idea how to fix the situation. If I didn't have a solution by the time I found out, my marriage would probably end just like hers did. I couldn't believe what a fool I was for helping her. I warned her that if I lost it, I would never talk to her again. Emily, trying to console me, mentioned that I had always been a loving wife, and Tom knew how much I loved him. I sarcastically replied that I was such a loving wife that my support of my promiscuous friend resulted in my husband getting his butt kicked by his best friend. She insisted that I didn't understand the situation, and that it would be years, at best, before I regained trust. I couldn't help but feel like a fool, wondering if Tom would ever trust me again. Having heard enough, I calmly returned to the street. My resilient nature allowed me to remain calm and focus on the task at hand. While waiting for a taxi, I realized I needed to start setting things right. But first, I needed to make sure I had all the facts. It was time to visit a friend. The passed-away sergeant and detectives appeared confused when I expressed my intention to pay bail, but after years of dealing with strange incidents in police work, they simply shrugged. They smirked at John's look when he saw me pull him out and laughed openly when I told John to just shut up until he was told to talk. Confused, John followed me and silently got into the car. After I gave the driver the address, we sat in silence until we arrived at the crime scene. The same bartender was on duty, nervous and obviously afraid of trouble. I quickly calmed him down, asking for a bottle of Glenmorangie's Signet, 2 glasses, and to be left alone. As we moved to a corner booth, I poured a generous portion into both glasses and pushed it towards John. We both drank and exchanged a sarcastic toast to the first drink. I looked at my friend. I explained to John that I didn't know about this setup. I just wanted to hang out and have a good time with him. They used our friendship against him, knowing I would never agree to this, so they started their lousy scheme without my knowledge. John looked at me carefully, able to tell when I was talking nonsense. It was clear from the expression on his face that now I was being honest. Once the initial anger had passed and he had cooled down in prison, John was able to think reasonably about what I told him. He expressed how she tore his heart out, and my wife Emily helped her. I shared my frustration, stating that I gave our marriage everything I had, only for it to be a waste of time because she chose to follow some strange man into bed. I refilled the drinks and simply listened to my friend while John expressed his frustration and anger about his marriage. When the whiskey and verbalization of the event eventually calmed John down, he apologized for the attack. John admitted he probably should have talked to me first, but he couldn't help himself. The revelation that his marriage and our friendship were over made him feel out of control. As much as it hurt that she cheated on him, the thought of me stabbing him in the back was even worse. Cheating was bad enough, but the idea of me laughing at him hurt even more. He sincerely apologized. I grinned, sipping my whiskey. It's okay. I probably deserved it for having an affair with your sister sometime during the Christmas holidays. When I asked how he found out she was cheating, John shook his head. He explained that a few weeks ago, he felt something was wrong in his marriage, so he started to pull away. He eventually concluded that she must be cheating, preparing to hire a private investigator. While he was at work, his phone started showing video and audio from the Ring camera on the front porch. The motion sensor went off while Amanda was picking up an Amazon package. During a phone call, she made an appointment to have closeness with someone and mentioned that I and Emily could help her, just like before. It didn't sound like I didn't know what was going on. It sounded like I was actively participating in the deception. I stared at him, not believing his eyes. 2 marriages had ended because John's wife couldn't close her legs and forgot about the camera, so Emily cheated too. Tom hadn't thought about it, but it made sense that she would do the same thing. She covered for John's wife. Actually, he was almost convinced that Emily didn't cheat. He heard them talking before they picked John up, and that convinced him that she wasn't out for a walk. Considering Emily's fidelity, Tom questioned why John wanted a divorce. Maybe it would be easier to forgive her if she had slept with someone else. The situation was even worse for him. The problem was not betrayal, but trust. Not only had she repeatedly lied to him about her actions and John's wife, but she had used their friendship to cover it up in the most evil way possible and make him an active participant in the deception. He wondered how he could stay married to her if he couldn't trust her anymore and his best friend hated her. He believed that trust could be restored, clarifying that he didn't trust his wife at all. However, he acknowledged that Emily loved him, prompting John to ask if he was sure this was the end. I expressed my belief that trust, cemented by time, was not stronger but weaker. While people may forgive, they never forget. He had no intention of spending the rest of his life hoping that, in years to come, this would be just a faded memory. I asserted that Emily knew what she was doing, and there was nothing she could say to solve the problem. It was time for him to leave and start over. John envied his friend for having an amicable divorce, and they would both remain on good terms. John joked about trying to find a Mexican brothel to get Amanda the right job for her skill set and pay less child support. I laughed, expressing awe at John's ability to see life as it is. It felt like his world was ending, but he knew that in the long run, he would be okay. He went home and talked to Emily, and since she already knew what was going to happen, it would likely be relatively smooth sailing. She cried and begged for counseling, but she understood that he would not be able to come to terms with her behavior. I recognized that it was out of character for her, and she knew it. It was time for him to take a new direction and look at his life with fresh eyes. The chapter in his marriage to Emily was over.
Story 4. Before my life spiraled into a storm of accusations and court battles, things were different. I thrived in the comfort of my small Ohio hometown where everything felt familiar. My days were filled with engineering projects, laughs with college friends who became business partners, and peaceful evenings with my wife, Tammy Jo. I thought life couldn't be better. Trust was natural, and betrayal seemed like a plot reserved for TV dramas. Tammy Jo's lively spirit and bright smile defined my early adulthood. We met young, fell in love quickly, and jumped into a fast-paced romance. I trusted her, us, and our future. But love proved more complicated than I imagined. I didn't see the collapse coming, and my once reliable peace was about to shatter. Take a breath, Danny, and calm down. Dave Peterson, my childhood friend turned county sheriff, tried to keep me steady as I explained the mess I was caught in. Bright lights glared overhead like an old detective show. Despite the tension, the setup was so cliché I nearly laughed. The only person not amused was the serious district attorney, Martha Erickson, whose sharp gaze and constant pen clicking amped up the pressure. Martha, a decade older than me, divorced and somewhat heavy-set, leaned forward, her brown hair falling past her shoulders. She had a kind side, but right now, she was all business. Sitting beside her was my lawyer, Joe Colston. For a small-town attorney, he was decent enough. He once had a shot with a big company in Detroit, but opted for a laid-back life, often giving legal advice online for quick cash. Joe, in his 50s with a receding hairline and a Trump-like comb-over, would look better embracing baldness. Joe, you've got 3 choices. Accept your baldness and comb it normally, get a transplant like Elton John, or shave it off and channel Professor X. Remember that prosecutor from Florida? He shaved his head, gained a cool nickname, and turned heads. Joe wasn't paying attention, just tapping his legal pad. Next to Joe, separated from me by Dave, sat Allison Payne. She used to be Allison Scott until I married her, unintentionally making her name the punchline of countless jokes. Allison is beautiful, petite with striking curves. Her red hair, like a fire engine, flows perfectly, and her healthy, sun-kissed skin is flawless. Her green eyes and captivating smile make people listen, though some guys are so mesmerized they miss her words. That was me once. I fell for her, and now we were married. Allison's small frame doesn't align with the typical assumptions. Her figure is proportionate, her smile precise. Today she beams at me, and everything else, the charges of attack, attempted murder, and serious harm, fades away. Allison, facing her own charges of hijacking and false imprisonment, is by my side. This is my girl. Tammy Jo's glare was filled with anger, jealousy, and resentment toward Allison, draining the room of any ease. Her parents, decent but unimaginative folks, weren't to blame for her behavior. Tammy Jo, or TJ as she preferred, had 2 friends who barely remembered her nickname, while others called her a pleasure, unrelated to her last name. I had my own nickname for her, Skankzilla, when I bothered addressing her. Tammy Jo, my ex-wife, was nothing like Allison. She was taller, curvier, and not as cute. Once she was attractive, with long dark hair, blue eyes, and an impressive figure, but time and life had changed her. Back then, I liked things in excess. Tammy Jo's striking legs and curves fit that mold, but our impulsive marriage fell apart soon after I graduated. All right, are you or aren't you responsible for what happened to the victim? Dave, now Sheriff Peterson, shouted. It's complicated, Dave. Maybe, but it's not really my fault, I replied. So it's her fault, right? Dave asked, pointing at Allison. Not entirely, I said, glancing at Allison. Look at her, Dave. She's beautiful. Focus, Danny. Who cut off the mayor's sons? You know what? Dave pressed. I have the answer, Sheriff, I said, holding back a laugh that would have set Allison off too. It was an accident. I was trying to help him, I explained, catching Martha's frantic note-taking. Martha, jerk is spelled with 2 S's, I said. Danny, how is this Tammy Jo's fault? She was in Michigan when this happened, Dave questioned. This started 3 years ago when we were married, I admitted. All right, we have time. Start from there, Dave said, gesturing to the coffee on the table. Allison raised her hand. Can I sit there? It's going to be a long story, she asked, pointing at my chair. If Danny's okay with it, Dave said. Allison didn't wait. She crossed the room, sat on my lap, wrapped her arms around me, and rested her head on my shoulder. The collective reaction from the room was palpable. "Hell no!" Tammy Jo yelled. "I don't want her on my husband's lap." "Ex-husband," I corrected. "If she hadn't stolen you during our rough patch, you'd still be my husband," Tammy Jo snapped. "You mean our divorce?" I shot back. Tammy Jo had a knack for liquidating the mood. "Does anyone mind Allison sitting there?" Dave asked. "No, just start the story," Martha replied. Joe, my lawyer, chimed in. "Whatever keeps my client happy works for me." He might have glanced at Martha's feet, but I wasn't sure. "All right, 3 years ago, I was doing well. I had an engineering degree from the University of Michigan and started a consulting firm with George, an electrical engineer, and Marty, a mechanical engineer. While jobs were scarce, we defied the odds, bypassed the big three, and built our own business that attracted plenty of clients. Tammy Jo and I had been together since our first love, and marriage was always a given, just a matter of when. During college, Tammy Jo kept her vow to remain a maid until marriage, despite being known for her wild side. But things took a dark turn at her 20th birthday party, when some guys at her school got her extremely drunk and attacked her. The next morning, she realized something was wrong, but couldn't piece it together. The men involved blackmailed her to stay silent, demanding more from her in exchange for their secrecy. Initially, she complied out of fear, but eventually it became a pattern, damaging her reputation beyond repair. When Tammy Jo returned home for the summer, she was ostracized. She had no friends, male or female, and even her roommate avoided her. Despite all this, she had only experienced real intimacy once, and she barely remembered it. That summer we reconnected, and I fell for her all over again, believing she loved me and would do anything for me. Early in our marriage, she was kind and devoted. We explored every facet of intimacy, deepening our bond. Things changed when we met Laura on the beach. Laura was the opposite of Tammy Jo, tall and slender. I noticed her, but it was Tammy Jo who brought her up. "She's hot, isn't she?" she asked. Surprised, I replied, "Not as hot as you, honey." Tammy Jo then hinted at a bold birthday gift idea. I didn't dwell on it, having just splurged on my dream car, a Ford GT. It was my reward for our business success and the most extravagant purchase I'd ever made besides our house. I spent the day driving it, thrilled with my new toy, when Tammy Jo called. "Danny, come home and open your present." I raced home and found her upstairs waiting in the bedroom. She stood, leaning over the bed with everything set up for me. 2 things I loved most, ready and waiting. Tammy Jo's curves always drove me wild. She'd gained a bit of weight over time, but she was still undeniably attractive. I hurriedly dropped my pants, eager for what was next. "Hold on, cowboy," Tammy Jo said with a smile. She stood up, letting her full figure show. "I needed to make sure you still wanted me," she teased. I nodded eagerly. "You still make me feel wanted," she said. "I'm glad I'm not just some neglected housewife." "That'll never happen, TJ," I reassured her. Back then, I truly thought I loved her. "Good," she said. "I have a surprise for you in honor of your birthday." The bathroom door opened and Laura stepped out wearing just a ribbon and high heels, wrapping around her petite frame. "You can spin me around whenever you want," Laura said playfully. Though I'd always been committed to one woman, it was my birthday, and Laura was undeniably beautiful. If I rejected the gift, Tammy Jo would be furious, so I stayed quiet. "I'll be back in a couple of hours," Tammy Jo said as she left. Once the door closed, I felt uneasy. Laura approached me, but I didn't feel the excitement I expected and pulled my pants back up. "It's not you," I said to her. "You're the best gift I've ever gotten, even better than my car." "Wait, what car?" she asked, intrigued. "A Ford GT," I replied. "Wow, can we take a ride?" she said excitedly. We spent the next 2 hours driving and chatting about cars. Laura said she felt at ease with me and even kissed me goodbye as Tammy Jo returned. Tammy Jo looked pleased, seeing Laura leave. "Did you have fun?" she asked. "Yes, we did," I replied honestly. "It wasn't as bad as you thought, was it?" she said, hinting again at the group activities she'd been suggesting for weeks. I had been clear that I wasn't interested, but she kept bringing it up. Realizing my expression, Tammy Jo dropped the topic for the night. A week later, Laura came back. When I asked why, she said she enjoyed spending time with me and liked the way I kissed. "Where's Tammy Jo?" I asked. "She went shopping," Laura said. "She said she loves you too much to watch at first and wanted you to get used to it." I sat down, feeling conflicted. Laura massaged my shoulders, her touch soothing. "What's on your mind?" she asked. I explained that I might be old-fashioned, but I only wanted Tammy Jo. Laura said Tammy Jo loved me deeply and was trying to make me happy in her own way. I nodded, but I wanted Tammy Jo to understand she was enough. That's how Laura and I spent the second visit, just talking. When I saw Laura for the third time, everything shifted. Tammy Jo had planned a barbecue, inviting 2 other couples. One couple was from our neighborhood, and I knew them casually through car talk. The second arrival shocked me. It was Laura and her much older boyfriend, Ken. "You know Laura," Tammy Jo said, wearing a lingerie top that barely held her. "This is Ken, Laura's boyfriend." Ken's smile was more of a smirk, and I disliked him immediately. He ignored Tammy Jo's revealing outfit, which was odd. Either he was unfazed or had seen it too many times before. After the neighbors left, Ken commented on my car. "Laura talks about it all the time," he said. Sensing tension, I tossed him my keys. "Be careful, the power comes on fast." He threw them back, admitting he couldn't drive a manual. "Come on, Danny, show it off," Tammy Jo encouraged. I took Laura for a drive, confused by the situation. She mentioned covering up, but Ken told her to stay as she was. What kind of man sends his girlfriend off like that? Tammy Jo said she'd change, so we left. After a fast drive, we returned sooner than expected. I walked inside and found Ken with Tammy Jo. I lost control, attacked Ken, and kept hitting him until Tammy Jo pulled me back. "Danny, you're going to eliminate him," she cried. "Get out of my house and take him with you," I yelled. Ken, bruised but not seriously hurt, moaned on the floor. Laura came in, looked at him without concern, and helped him out. No one said a word. "Why are you still here?" I asked Tammy Jo. I expected her to be defensive or angry, but she looked devastated and started crying, as if I had done something wrong. It felt like I had broken some unspoken rule. Despite everything, I still loved Tammy Jo, so her breakdown hit me hard. I hugged her, saying it would be okay, and promised to be generous in the divorce, even though we had a prenup. This only made her cry louder. She pushed me away, grabbed a pen, and wrote, "I do not want or accept any money from Danny or his company," signing it tearfully. I knew it wouldn't stand up in court, but it made me wonder, if not money, what did she want? "What do you want, TJ?" I asked. "You can have the house, more than what's in the prenup." She cried even more. "I just want you," she shouted. "That's all I ever wanted." "But you were just with him," I said. "Why not be with him and be happy?" She looked at me, puzzled. "You really don't get it, do you?" she said. "I'm not staying married to someone who cheats," I said. "How did I cheat?" she asked. "I love you. You and I are meant to be together. Take this somewhere else," I replied. "Danny, love and sex aren't the same," she said, speaking slowly like I was a child. "We're young, have money, and are figuring things out. I just wanted to explore and experience new things. Our bad life is so good that I want to build on it." I was stunned, unsure who was thinking irrationally. Her calm explanation seemed logical, but I couldn't accept it. "How does that excuse what you did?" I asked. "I didn't cheat," she said firmly. "I wanted us to try swapping. You said no, and I respected that, but tried to ease into it with smaller steps." "I'd still say no," I replied. "I don't want that. You're all I need." "But Danny, you didn't," she said. "You enjoyed it. Even now, I feel insecure, afraid of losing you." "What do you mean?" I asked. "We didn't do any of that." One evening, as I passed by, she said, "Can we have dinner at Texas Roadhouse?" "No, thanks," I replied. "Danny, let me make this right," she said. "I love you more than anything." "I'll think about it, TJ," I said. That conversation made me consider forgiveness, but I still needed time. The wound was fresh, and I barely spoke to her for days. I wondered how Laura felt or how Ken fared after the fight. At the barbecue, it had seemed like things were off between Laura and Ken, maybe explaining why he allowed her involvement. Despite Laura's beauty, I couldn't trade her for Tammy Jo. I loved Tammy Jo deeply and couldn't imagine life without her. The next morning before leaving, I kissed her goodbye. She sighed and tried to pull me into bed. "I've missed you," she whispered. I went to work and immediately called Laura. She sounded down, and I worried Ken might have taken out his anger on her after the fight. "Laura, are you okay?" I asked. "Not really," she said, her voice tinged with sadness. "What's going on?" I asked. "Can we meet and talk?" she replied, giving me the address of a park near her house. I felt uneasy about going to her place, so I agreed. When I saw Laura at the park, she looked as beautiful as when I first saw her playing tennis. But now she was crying. "What's wrong?" "I'm sorry for what happened with Ken," I said, though I wasn't truly sorry, just worried about her. "Why did he do that?" she asked, confused. "Because he thought we were involved and didn't like how I reacted when I found him with Tammy Jo," I explained. "That's what bothers me most," she said, tearing up. "What do you mean?" I asked. "You can tell him the truth, and he'll back off." Laura burst into tears, and I led her to a bench. "What's wrong, Laura?" "I messed everything up," she sobbed. "That's why I don't have a chance with you, isn't it?" "What are you talking about?" I asked. Your wife paid me to show up at your house for your birthday, she admitted. I'm a student with loans and bills. She offered me $1,000 and I couldn't pass it up. I liked you, and it was supposed to be one time. But she called again, and I agreed. Honestly, I'd do it for free. She wiped her tears. You never made a move on me, and I started hoping for more. But when she asked me to come a third time with a swimsuit, I realized you loved her, and I didn't stand a chance. Is that what made Ken upset? Did he know you had feelings for me? I asked. She laughed. I met Ken the day of the barbecue. Your wife had me pick him up, and that's when I learned he was supposed to be my boyfriend. I thought it was all part of a role play. Anger surged through me. I thanked Laura, drove away, and called my lawyer, Joe Colston, to start the divorce. Joe, new to the firm, asked if I had the prenuptial agreement. I said I'd grab it from the house and bring it to him. I felt surprisingly calm, maybe because I'd already been considering leaving Tammy Jo after all the lies. My plan was simple. Sneak in, grab the document, and leave without drama. But things went wrong. As I quietly opened the gate to our pool area, I saw Tammy Jo lounging in the sun, with Ken between her legs and 2 other men involved. The sight was shocking. I shut the gate loudly, and they all froze. Oh no, Tammy Jo muttered. Ken's eyes widened. Oh crap. He scrambled to climb our 8-foot privacy fence, still barefoot and without clothes, desperate to flee rather than face me. One man tried to dress quickly. I headed inside while Tammy Jo started to cry. Danny, let me explain, Tammy Jo pleaded. I laughed. He's going for a tool, Ken said. He knew I had a collection of swords and axes at home. One guy blocked me, while the other, still without clothes, dashed to the gate. The one in front of me tried to speak, but I slapped him and asked, "What?" before pushing him aside. When I left with the document, all 3 men were gone. Danny, please, Tammy Jo cried. Say what you need to now, Tammy Jo, I said calmly. When I come back tonight, I want you and your things gone. I offered a fair divorce before, but now I'm sticking to the prenup. $10,000 for every year we were married. I wrote her a check for $20,000. You can keep the car. No, Danny, she said. I was just trying to make things better. Time's up, TJ, I said firmly. To make things right with Ken and Laura, I had to balance it out, she claimed. You were with Laura 3 times, so I needed to do it too. I laughed. Sure, TJ, makes sense. Yes, she said, hopeful. I understand now. You're a lying, cheating woman, I said. Forget the car, call a taxi. Why? She whined. You lied more than once, I said. Laura and Ken met at the barbecue. You lied about balancing things out with him. Who were those other 2 men? And you paid Laura to seduce me. Get out of my house. But Danny, it's not cheating if we both did it, she protested. It was just lovemaking. Call Laura and confirm. I never touched her. I loved you, TJ. You were enough for me, I said. Then I left, ignoring her cries. I gave my lawyer the prenup and told him to serve the papers at Texas Roadhouse at 6 p.m. where I'd arranged to meet Tammy Jo. I called her, pretending to reconsider. TJ, I'm so angry, but I don't know how to live without you. Can we talk one last time? Yes, Danny, she said eagerly. I'll do anything. Texas Roadhouse, 6 p.m. Wear the red dress, I said. No underwear? She teased. Doesn't matter, but come ready to tell me everything, I said. Of course. What's the second thing? She asked. Be prepared for a shock, I replied. My lawyer, surprised, nodded as I left. The next few weeks were tense. Tammy Jo fought the divorce, but didn't try to change the prenup or ask for more money. She even took out a full-page ad in the newspaper declaring her love. I remained firm. The divorce was finalized, and I could move forward. I wasn't cruel. Besides the $20,000, I gave her a third of our savings and a house. She used some money for therapy and cruises aimed at addressing personal issues, texting me updates along the way. Tammy Jo often showed up at my apartment, trying to talk. One bold visit was on my birthday, wearing just a raincoat and heels. She reminded me we always had birthdays, X, even before marriage, and saw no reason to stop. Tempted but determined, I refused. When she wouldn't leave, I called the police. I missed her, but I was trying to move on, even though she wouldn't let go. One morning, a detour took me down an unfamiliar street, where I found a small cafe and decided to have breakfast. As I sat there feeling down about my life, divorced for almost a year and unable to forget TJ, a crash interrupted my thoughts. My Ford GT parked nearby had been hit by an old truck. The noise drew everyone's attention, and the car was severely damaged while the old truck had barely a scratch. I rushed to the truck and found a woman with striking green eyes and red hair, looking terrified. Are you okay? I asked. I think so, she said, admitting her brakes had failed. Don't give extra info, I warned. It could be used against you. She thanked me and asked about the car. I assured her insurance would handle it. I don't have insurance, she whispered. You're in trouble, I said. How expensive is it? She asked nervously. Over 100,000, I said. She looked faint, and I caught her as she fell. She was much smaller than TJ and light as a feather. An ambulance came, checked her out, and said she was fine but recommended a hospital visit. I'm so sorry, she said, eyes wide with remorse. I'll pay you back, even if it takes my whole life, she added, once I find a job and a place to live. Where have you been staying? I asked. In my truck, she said, now impounded by the police. I laughed, and the day flew by as we visited the hospital. She was fine except for a few bruises. I offered her my spare room until her truck was released. Promise not to try anything funny, she said seriously. I promised, and she nodded. Good, because I wouldn't want to hurt you after you've been so kind, she said. I took Allison shopping, and she wasn't thrilled. I bought her jeans and sneakers like she preferred, but insisted she also get skirts, blouses, and nice shoes. I owe you more than I could ever repay, she said. Why buy dressy clothes? I won't wear them. You have to, Ellie, I replied. You can't wear jeans to work. But I don't have a job, she grinned. I think I can get you one at my office, I said. Cleaning? She joked. You'll see, I laughed. At home, she liked my apartment and offered to cook, but I ordered pizza since she was still shaken from the accident. While waiting, she bathed and came out in a towel, no nightwear bought. I gave her an old pair of pajamas, which she made look amazing. She fell asleep on the couch, and I covered her before going to bed. For the first time in ages, I didn't think of Tammy Jo. The next morning, Allison put on one of the new skirts. We're going to work, I told her. I introduced her as my new assistant. She caught on quickly and was a hard-working, fast learner. Within a month, she was efficient. Meanwhile, her truck was declared a road hazard, costing more to fix than it was worth. And she got a fine for no insurance, which I covered. Allison worked as my assistant and kept the apartment tidy. You don't need to do this, I said. You must be exhausted. It's not a burden, she replied. After all you've done for me, it's the least I can do. But you won't need to worry much longer. Why? I asked. I found an apartment, she said. It's not great, but I can afford it with my salary. You're paying me too much, so I can start repaying you. I nodded, surprised. I wanted to tell her to stay, but couldn't, probably because of how Tammy Jo had controlled me. Weeks later, Allison announced she had a date. A colleague is showing me around the city, she said. I felt angry, but said nothing. She looked stunning when she came out, which only made it worse. Don't wait up, I might be late, she said cheerfully. Just go, I muttered. She paused, waiting for something I didn't say. The entire night, I paced. At 2 a.m., I almost called her, but didn't. Then my phone rang. Allison, are you... I started. Is that the redhead you asked to dinner? Tammy Jo's angry voice cut in. What's wrong with you, Danny? I'm in therapy trying to fix us, and you're seeing someone else. I almost laughed, but was too mad at Allison. Tammy Jo, we're divorced. We have nothing to fix. You wanted to experiment, so now we're free. You do what you want. I'll invite redheads to dinner. She's so tiny, Tammy Jo said. If you care about her, you should let her go. I might ruin her. I laughed and hung up. At 1 a.m., Allison came home, and I ran to my room. The next morning, she seemed happy, but said nothing, and I avoided her all day. When she came to my office at lunch, I told her I was too busy. We could order in, she suggested. I'm not hungry, I replied. She looked hurt, but walked away with Carolyn. Later at 3 p.m., Tammy Jo called. Good job, Danny, she said. I was serious about hurting her. You're mine, and I'll get you back. I hung up. Allison went out every night, and tension grew. Finally, I asked when she'd leave. Soon, she said, looking unhappy. That evening, after Allison left, someone knocked. It was Joe Dawson, the building's head of maintenance. Why are you treating Allison this way? He asked. What are you talking about? I replied, suspecting Tammy Jo's involvement. She's crazy about you. You bring women home and make her leave. I laughed and showed him my empty place. You've got it wrong, Joe. Allison is the one going out every night. Joe looked surprised, then laughed. Same thing my mom did to my dad. Come see. He led me to the laundry room and opened the door. There was Allison, reading and yawning. She's been doing this every night, Joe said. Relief and frustration hit me. Joe called later to say Allison was on her way home. I left, turned off the lights, and waited in my car down the street. When she peeked outside to check if I was gone, I returned with my shirt unbuttoned, lipstick on my collar, and my zipper down. Allison, arms crossed and furious, shouted, Where were you? She noticed my disheveled look and started crying before running to her room. I knocked and heard her sobbing. I opened the door to see her face down, crying. Despite my anger, my feelings for her were strong. Part of me felt she deserved the hurt for playing games, but seeing her like that made me regret it. "I'll leave tomorrow," she said, still crying. "Don't go, Allison," I said. "How could I be so stupid?" she sobbed, her face turning from tearful to angry in an instant. "I never wanted this," she cried. "It was Carolyn's idea, and look where it got us." "Ellie, what do you mean?" I asked. My confused look seemed to spark more anger in her. "Oh God, you're such a jerk. Why couldn't I fall in love with someone who wasn't broken?" she said, glaring at me. "Love?" I said, pointing at her, the word tasting strange after Tammy Jo. "Me?" I asked, surprised. "Why do you care?" she snapped. "Just another thing for you to mock while you date every woman you meet." "What are you talking about, Ellie?" I asked, confused. "I'm not stupid," she shouted. "You come home smelling like perfume, lipstick on your collar, clothes a mess." "Let's review, Ellie," I said. "Maybe you really are mistaken." She looked ready to argue, but I covered her mouth with my hand. "Can we talk calmly?" I asked. She nodded. When I removed my hand, she tried speaking again, so I kissed her. Her soft lips were hesitant at first, then she melted into the kiss and responded passionately before suddenly pulling away. "I shouldn't have done that. You just came back from someone else and you called me stupid," she said. "Then why did you?" I teased. "Because she trailed off, lips pursed. "Love me," I said mockingly. "No," she snapped. "You already said it," I replied. She glanced at the lipstick on my collar. "Where else do you have lipstick?" she demanded. "On your dressing table," I said. "It's yours, Ellie, and the perfume is yours too." Realization crossed her face. "I beat you at your own game," I said. "If I wanted anyone, it'd be you. Your plan worked. I was jealous, but couldn't say it after what Tammy Jo did." Ellie nodded, holding out her hands. "I wanted to trust her, but needed her honesty. You went on dates, and I felt jealous. I wanted you to feel the same. I didn't want to do it," she admitted. "Caroline said you'd never open up unless pushed. I just wanted you to tell me not to go, but you never did. We tried hiding it at work, but it didn't last. Within days, coworkers joked, 'Looks like you finally pulled your head out of your A.' Caroline was the first to notice. After a meeting, she looked between us and said, 'You two are together, aren't you? You're in love.' Carrie, that's absurd," Marty, one of my closest friends, said. "He'd never go for it." But Caroline saw through it. "Allison, stand next to him," Caroline ordered. Allison obeyed, avoiding my eyes. "See how she lit up?" Caroline exclaimed. "How did I not see this?" June brought big changes. I married Allison, and we bought a beautiful house. I also treated myself to a custom Mustang Shelby GT 500 KR Super Snake. It wasn't a sleek sports car like the GT, but a true American muscle car. Its nearly 800 horsepower was breathtaking, and tires wore out quickly from its power. Allison loved her new F-150, but knew the Mustang was off limits. She was my soulmate, with no doubts or conflicts like with Tammy Jo. We completed each other. When Tammy Jo learned about my wedding, she was furious. Her first encounter with Allison was memorable. "Get away from him, witch," she screamed, bringing a scene from Aliens to life. Allison, calm as ever, stepped up to Tammy Jo and looked her over. Tammy Jo, visibly upset, was nearly hyperventilating. The commotion drew the attention of nearby men, their eyes darting to her heaving chest. But I felt none of my old attraction. Her hold on me was gone. "Allison, she's right, isn't she?" Tammy Jo sneered. Allison glanced at me and I nodded. "Yes, she's right, but it doesn't matter now." Tammy Jo's rage flared. "You'll regret this," she yelled. Allison shook her head calmly. "He's not your husband anymore, you're divorced." "It was just a formality," Tammy Jo retorted. I noticed she'd put on weight around her chest, hips, and stomach. "Leave Danny alone," she shouted, sounding desperate. Allison tilted her head slightly. "2 words, squats and breath mints," she said coldly. I couldn't help but laugh. It was sharp, witty, and bold. Having 2 women clash over me was surreal, but it reaffirmed I'd moved on from Tammy Jo. Her love was turbulent, full of highs and lows, an exhausting cycle of seeking excitement. She said she loved me, but it was never enough. Ellie was different. She was steady, supportive, and we found happiness in simple moments. Our love was peaceful and real, without drama. When she said she loved me, it was true and unwavering. The final encounter with Tammy Jo came months later. I walked in to find her sitting on my couch. Alarmed, I was ready to call the police. "Where's Ellie?" I shouted, worried. "Calm down, silly," Ellie said behind me. I spun around and hugged her. "I'm okay, Danny," she reassured me. "Tammy Jo came to apologize." "What?" I asked, half expecting a trick. "My therapist said I need to accept that I lost you and move on," Tammy Jo admitted. I was wrong to take it out on Allison, and I'm sorry. It felt insincere, but over time, I realized I was wrong. Tammy Jo and Allison started spending time together, and I'd come home to find them lounging by the pool. Occasionally, Tammy Jo would bend over suggestively when Ellie wasn't looking. We even had dinner a few times, and I had to admit it was enjoyable. Then Tammy Jo made her move. One evening after a barbecue, she said, "Why don't we go inside?" "I don't feel like watching a movie," I replied. "This moonlight makes me think differently." "Exactly," Tammy Jo said, her tone filled with desire, sounding almost intoxicated, though we'd only had one beer each. Ellie stood abruptly, eyes hard. "What are you talking about, Tammy?" she demanded. Tammy Jo gave a sly smile. "Allison, you're his wife, and I was his wife. We have that in common. I told you I still love him, and I have strong feelings for you too. We should be together, all three of us." Ellie's face flushed with anger. "Get out of my house now!" she shouted, angrier than I'd ever seen her. Tammy Jo's eyes narrowed. "I let you keep him for now, but you don't have what it takes to satisfy Danny long-term," she said, adjusting her top until one of her bosoms slipped out, whether by accident or design. Ellie turned to me, eyes sharp. "Is it true, Danny?" she asked. "No, Ellie," I said firmly. "From the start, I told you I wanted nothing to do with her. Tammy Jo was into things I couldn't stand. But you and I, we're forever. I love you more than I ever loved her. I'd never share you with anyone." "Allison, there's something twisted about you," Ellie said, turning back to Tammy Jo. "You act like those women in adult films, always performing for attention. And assuming I'd share my husband? Never. I'm all he needs." Tammy Jo's eyes narrowed. "You've made a big mistake, sweetheart. I'll get him back, and it'll cost you more than you think. You'll regret not taking my offer." Tammy Jo glanced at me. "I went to therapy for you, Danny. I realized other guys' attention was nothing compared to just watching a movie with you. I was willing to share you temporarily to win you back." Weeks passed without seeing Tammy Jo, but I heard stories about her reckless behavior. My accountant mentioned she was nearly out of money and could lose her house. She started dating Bobby McGillicuddy, the mayor's son, known for trouble and a record of sexual attack charges. Some settled and one reduced to misconduct. Their relationship made sense. They were both chaotic. She needed his money. He needed her wild energy. 2 weeks later, my life changed. Dave Peterson, the county sheriff, and an old friend pulled me over on my way home. "Danny, come to the hospital," he said urgently. "Dave, what happened?" I asked, fear tightening my chest. He didn't answer, just drove with the siren blaring. I feared Ellie was dead. At the hospital, doctors wouldn't meet my eyes. They led me to a small room where I found Ellie curled up, silent and crying. I rubbed her back gently, and she sighed, a small sound that gave me hope. "That's a good sign," said a woman behind me. I turned to see Dr. Martha. "What happened?" I demanded. "Your wife was sedated and attacked," she said, voice trembling. "Who?" I asked, barely able to control my rage. "We don't know. She hasn't spoken to anyone," the doctor said. "Danny!" Ellie's weak voice came from behind. I rushed to her side. "Yes, honey? Do you still want to be married to me?" she whispered. "Ellie, don't say that. I've loved you since the day I met you," she muttered. "I still owe you for crashing your car. Ellie, you've repaid me 1,000,000 times over. The car doesn't matter." "Take me home, Danny. They can't help me. I need you," she said. I wrapped her in my jacket and picked her up. The doctor tried to protest, but a look silenced her. Dave met me at the door. "Danny, I need to ask her questions. She's a victim, not a suspect. Find who did this before I do," I said, eyes cold. Dave stepped back, hand on his magnum. "Sorry, Danny," he muttered. I looked at a nearby guard. "Did you see that?" "Yes, sir. He reached for his tool," the guard confirmed. "Good," I said. Dave's face fell. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Now there's a witness that you threatened an unarmed man holding a victim." "The public won't like that," I said. "Danny, it's not what it seems. Until this is resolved, that's how it stands. I'll get lawyers and security to protect her." "Can I come by later to ask questions?" Dave asked. "She's been through enough. I'll call when she's ready." It took days for Ellie to feel better. Dave came to ask questions, which was necessary but hard to watch. When he asked me to leave the room, my instinct to protect her fought against the need for answers. When Dave left, my anger surged again. Watching Ellie struggle to describe what happened, reliving the trauma as she recalled details about those men, it was like reopening a wound that hadn't healed. "We'll get through this, Ellie," I said. "We'll be fine." "You don't want me to leave?" she asked. I was stunned. "Why would you even think that? I love you more than anything. Why would I ever want you to go? It's hard enough to be apart when I'm at work." She smiled softly and took my hand. "I love you too, you fool," she said. a tear rolling down her cheek. But not everyone feels the same way. Anyone who truly promised to be with you would, I said firmly. Not if they think I'm damaged, she whispered. I looked at her, not fully understanding, but knowing she'd tell me when ready. It took weeks for Ellie to start feeling better, with some aspects of her healing coming more slowly than others. For the first few days, we were inseparable, even going to the bathroom together. She couldn't stand being alone, even for a moment. It was challenging. No man wants to see everything a woman does in there. I was amazed at some of the things my wonderful wife did regularly. I thought our intimacy would take time to return, but I was wrong. As soon as her bruises faded, Ellie wanted to be close again, as if she needed reassurance of our bond. We made love slowly and gently, and she never wanted it to end. It was a moment that proved we were okay. The biggest challenge was getting Ellie comfortable leaving the house and being around others. One evening, Tammy Jo visited to apologize again. She noticed the changes in Ellie, but claimed not to know what had happened. This set off alarm bells for me. Everyone who came to offer support was in touch with Tammy Jo, so how could she not know? I felt something was off. Throughout this ordeal, I avoided asking Ellie for details about what happened or how many were involved. I wanted her to know that what mattered most was her survival and my unwavering love. Where I grew up, even a kiss with another man could ruin a woman's reputation, and her partner would leave her to maintain his honor. I feared I might lose Ellie, who was the best thing that ever happened to me. Ellie, you'll never lose me. Unless it's because I go to jail for finding and dealing with those responsible, I told her. We went inside, held each other, and fell asleep. Now I realize that might have been the wrong thing to say. It's been months since the attack, Dave, and your department still hasn't made any progress. You've called her multiple times for statements, but you haven't learned anything. I see now that you knew about Bobby and possibly his friends all along. You ignored it, Dave, prioritizing your job over justice. Dave opened his mouth to speak, but stayed silent. A few weeks later, one of the men who held Ellie's hands during the attack died from an overdose. We didn't know he was involved until Bobby mentioned it. Didn't they tell you? The other one died 2 weeks ago, Bobby said. They said it was a hunting accident. Ellie may have known, but she had nothing to do with their deaths. At that time, I was facing my own struggles. I felt my world crumbling, certain I was going to lose what mattered most. Ellie and I moved forward, realizing you'd probably never catch them, Dave. I started suggesting to Ellie that it might be time to start a family, but she avoided the subject or changed it. One day I pressed her. It's just not the right time, she said, maybe in a month or so. I was hurt. I always thought the woman I loved would want children with me. Something felt wrong. Then Tammy Jo called. Hey, she began with mock sympathy. I know this is tough, but sometimes trauma changes people. You know about Stockholm Syndrome, right? If things don't work out with Ellie, you can always come back to me. By the way, could you lend me some money? Ellie's behavior grew stranger. It broke my heart, and I couldn't imagine life without her, but my trust was fading. I hired a private investigator. 2 days later, he returned with findings. I found something, he said, handing me the report with an apologetic look. My heart sank as I flipped through the photos. This morning, about half an hour after you left for work, Ellie dressed up and went to a bar on the east side, he said. She spent a while drinking and talking to a man I didn't recognize. He continued. I took these photos. I saw Ellie with Bobby McGillicuddy. I didn't know then that he was the one who attacked her while others held her down. That night, I went home and silently went to bed. Ellie tried to comfort me. What's wrong? She asked. Just work stress, I lied. She seemed doubtful, but lay beside me. The next day, my phone rang. It was the investigator. I intercepted a call between Bobby and Ellie, he said. Listen to this. He played the recording. Hey, baby, Ellie said. Can I see you today? Bobby replied. Maybe. What do you mean? Ellie asked. I think it's time we got to know each other better. I booked us a room at the Shangri-La Motel, Ellie continued. We can meet at lunch, and I'll be home before Danny gets back from work. Why do women always mention this guy? Bobby said. He's not that special. If you insult Danny, I won't sleep with you. I'll just beat you up, Ellie said angrily. Her tone was intense. If she loved me, why was she doing this? Okay, baby, Bobby said. I get it. He's not into wild stuff, huh? As far as I knew, neither was Ellie. Now, nothing surprised me anymore. Exactly, Ellie said softly. If you follow my rules, it'll be an experience like nothing you've ever had. She gave Bobby directions to the motel and the room number. Anger surged, and I threw my phone across the room before picking it back up. Sorry, man, my private investigator said. It's tough, but at least now you can end things and move on. I've been through it. Just keep trying until you find the right one. With tears streaming down my face, I told him I thought I had already found her. I sat at my desk staring at my computer but doing nothing. My mind was consumed with thoughts of Ellie. Ideas of revenge crept in. No, I wouldn't. But maybe I could make her pay for the car? Probably not. Still, I knew I wouldn't go quietly. Lost in thought, I realized it was almost noon, and Ellie would soon be meeting Bobby. I decided to crash their meeting and make it clear she wasn't welcome back. Maybe I'd even teach Bobby a lesson. I rushed to my Mustang and started it just as my phone rang. It was Tammy Jo. She asked how I was and mentioned she was starting fresh, wanting to be friends. Knowing I'd need support soon, I spoke to her while driving. When I reached the motel, I told Tammy Jo I'd call back later. She sounded so cheerful that I almost forgot her past betrayals. I wondered if people really could change, but realized I was bracing for the loneliness I'd face without Ellie. I felt desperate, trying to use Tammy Jo as a lifeline against the despair I anticipated, but I realized it would be foolish to leave one cheater only to get involved with another. I found the room Ellie had mentioned. Peering through the window, I was shocked to see Bobby without clothes and handcuffed to the bed, while Ellie stood over him, fully clothed. I'd seen similar scenarios online, so it didn't seem out of place at first. Ellie slapped Bobby repeatedly, hitting him with surprising force. I remembered her telling him he had to play her game to the end. Slowly, I turned the doorknob and stepped inside. She was too focused to notice me. "I'll be a great mom, you know," Ellie said. "Too bad I couldn't get to your friends. They were already dead when I figured out what needed to be done." "You'll never be a mother, you psycho," Bobby spat. "As soon as I'm free, you're finished." "Who said you'd be free?" she countered. "I'll do anything to protect Danny. I can't let you leave." Then I noticed what was in her hand. It was small in my eyes, but in hers it looked formidable. It was a Venetian axe, a combat replica from a museum catalog, a one-handed, single-headed battle axe from 14th century Italy. The handle, wrapped in wire, was slightly curved and made of chrome-plated steel with brass accents. A lion motif decorated the back of the head, and the sharp front edge gleamed dangerously. Unlike most axes meant for breaking armor, this one was sharp. I suddenly realized this wasn't about infidelity. I was missing something. Ellie hadn't betrayed me. She had lured Bobby there for another purpose. What did she mean when she said she'd do anything to protect me? "Oh, damn, you cut me, you crazy woman," Bobby shouted. "You don't need to protect your precious husband. He's already doing all that martial arts nonsense. Besides, this was always about him. Tammy Jo would have torn us apart if anything happened to him. It was her idea. She wanted to make him think you were unfaithful, so she'd get another chance with him." He changed his tone. "Look, I'm sorry I got mixed up in this. I'm sorry for what we did to you. We honestly thought that with all that stuff in your system, you'd be into it. With that much junk in you, you should have wanted everything you saw." "Thanks. That's what I needed to hear," Ellie said. "And tell that scheming woman I'm coming for her too." "I'll tell her," he said. Before he could finish, I watched Ellie raise the axe above her head. I couldn't let her go through with it. I moved behind her, catching her hand before she brought it down and kissed her. "No, Ellie," I said, kissing her again. Time seemed to stop, and we both realized we had made a huge mistake. A few weeks ago, when I said I'd kill those responsible, she thought I'd end up in jail. To prevent that, she decided to take matters into her own hands. The first two men died in accidents, but she lured Bobby here to finish the job. I'd been down these past days, and she assumed it was due to frustration. She pointed to the recording device by the bed that was capturing everything, including Bobby's confession implicating Tammy Jo. "I love you, Danny," she said. "I had to do this so we could move on and have a family. I didn't want to risk getting pregnant and ending up in jail. What if I had to hurt him and went to prison? You wouldn't want to be married to an inmate." "I would," I said, and we kissed passionately. "I thought you were cheating on me," I admitted. She smiled and laughed softly. "Danny, I told you I could never betray you. What do I need to do to prove it?" Then it happened. Lost in our embrace, the axe slipped from Ellie's hands and fell onto the bed. The heavy axe head landed first, hitting Bobby. His screams probably echoed across the state. And as captured on the recording, Ellie and I were momentarily stunned, unsure of what to do next. I rushed to the bathroom for a towel while Ellie called an ambulance. I tossed it to Bobby and told him to press it against his wound. I wasn't about to do it for him. Honestly, I would have preferred if he hadn't made it. Luckily, the ambulance arrived before he bled out or went into shock. He survived, but the blame was squarely on him. "The real question, Dave, is, what are you going to do about this?" I said. "We have Bobby's confession on tape admitting that he and his friends attacked my wife. He also implicated Tammy Jo as the mastermind." All eyes turned to Dave. Tammy Jo tried to slip out. "I'm sorry, Danny," she said, "but that's on you too." If you'd just get rid of that little redhead or let me share you with her, none of this would have happened and we'd all be happy." Her admission sounded like a villain's line at the end of every Scooby-Doo episode, and I would have gotten away with it if it weren't for those meddling kids. She pushed against the deputies at the door, but they stood firm. "Danny, you're putting me in a tough spot," Dave said. "With this tape, the mayor's son could face a long sentence, even though what happened could be spun as an accident. I could pin this on you or Allison and possibly free Bobby, but I'll make you a deal. Hand over the tape and you and the redhead walk out of here. Everyone goes home and we forget this ever happened. Officially, Bobby's injury will be marked as an industrial accident." "What do you think, Martha?" I asked. She stared at her shoes. Joe, my lawyer, did the same. He couldn't meet my eyes. "He slept with Martha," Ellie whispered. "We need a new lawyer, honey." I took a deep breath. "Joe, you're fired," I said. "You're no longer my company's attorney and won't be receiving any more work from us." He looked irritated, but knew I was serious. "Martha, I respected you. I thought you were not only attractive, but also honest and committed to the law. I was wrong. This city will miss you." "What are you talking about?" she said, defensive. "If I don't agree to this, it's my career on the line. I could lose my job." "What about your integrity?" I asked. "It's easy for you to talk like that," she retorted. "Your company is a money-making machine. The rest of us have to deal with reality. Try paying your mortgage or car loan with honor, and then come talk to me." "Dave, we grew up together. I thought you'd stand up and do what's right, not just follow the mayor," I said. "Danny, this is what's right for me and my family. I have kids to support, but at least look at it this way. Bobby won't hurt anyone else, even if they manage to reattach him," Dave said, staring at the floor. "And Tammy Jo will suffer too. Seeing you and Allison together will be a constant reminder of what she lost. You two have enough to start fresh somewhere else." "Okay, Dave," I said. I hoped it wouldn't come to this. "To what?" he asked with a sigh. "Mustang," I said loudly. Everyone in the room stared at me as if I had lost my mind. "Danny, why are you shouting? What does your car have to do with this?" Dave asked, confused. "That's the code word I was told to use," I explained. He looked at me, puzzled. Within moments, heavily armed officers with FBI and state police vests stormed the room. They quickly handcuffed Tammy Jo, Martha, and Dave, warning the deputies not to interfere. A man in a suit entered after everyone was secured. Dave, Martha, and Joe recognized him. It was the state attorney general. Dave and Martha were charged with breach of public trust and conspiracy to obstruct justice, and the mayor would likely face charges too. Bobby was charged with attack, and Tammy Jo faced charges of solicitation and conspiracy. Joe was at risk of losing his law license for professional misconduct. The attorney general reassured us that Bobby's injury was considered an accident, and neither Ellie nor I would face charges, especially considering the conspiracy to protect her attackers. After a few minutes, he told us we could go home, but not leave town. "We'll need your testimony, but we have a strong case against them all." Ellie and I were finally alone. She kissed me, and we walked out to my Mustang, feeling an immense sense of relief. "Can we come back for my car tomorrow, or have someone pick it up?" she asked. "Right now, I just need to be close to you, idiot." "Why am I an idiot?" I asked. "There are too many reasons to count," she said with a smile. "Trust me, you're an idiot." "If I'm such an idiot, why do you want to get in my car?" "Maybe I should just let Joe serve you the divorce papers he's been working on," I joked. Her smile vanished, and her face went pale, as if all the blood had drained from it. "You were—" she started. "I'm sorry, Ellie," I said. "I thought—" "Idiot," she said, her voice softening. "You really are a fool, Danny, but you're my fool. Don't ever forget that. And with Joe's future in doubt, he won't be causing any trouble." "Name one reason," I said. "I want to hear just one." "DJP Square," she said. "What's that?" we both asked at the same time, then smiled. "You first," I said. "I want to know why I'm an idiot." "Okay," she said. "But don't get upset if I keep going. You're a fool because you don't realize how much I love you, Danny. Without you, I'd be lost. You're my everything. The second reason, how could you even think I'd cheat on you? That's not just foolishness, that's brain damage. But I upgraded you from brain damage to fool, because Tammy Jo really did betray you, so maybe you're still shaken. And I promoted you, because I love you, my foolish man." She looked at me as I sat there, stunned, and gently pushed my jaw closed. "I can't stop now," she laughed. "You're such a fool for thinking I didn't want kids with you. Honestly, what do I tell you every time we're close? Do I need to—" "Okay, that's enough," I interrupted. "So, what is DJP Square? You said to name one." She smiled, taking my hand. "I thought we'd name one of our kids after his dad." DJP Square stands for Daniel James Payne Jr., but if that's too formal, we can just call him Fool Jr. I leaned in, kissed her, and started the Mustang's powerful engine. The car was hard to manage at low speeds due to its upgraded supercharger. Danny, while you were talking, I stayed quiet, but you lied, she said. I found the private investigator's reports hidden in your desk. You knew who those men were before they died. I was afraid you'd go after them and end up in jail. I couldn't let you throw your life away because of me, so I had to deal with Bobby first. Bobby's friend, Stu Morgenstern, provided the substances they used on you. He gave Bobby a vial of GBL, and Bobby passed it to Tammy Jo. When you met her for lunch, one of them slipped it into your drink. My investigator overheard Stu bragging while trying to sell more of it, which is how we learned about Duncan Holmes, Bobby's other friend. We didn't know Bobby had participated in the attack. We thought he only helped Tammy Jo drug you. Duncan was the one who... I stopped, not wanting her to relive the trauma. I kissed her deeply, hoping to replace the painful memory with a better one. Anyway, I had nothing to do with their deaths. GBL is powerful and dangerous in small doses. The difference between making someone compliant and causing a coma or death is minimal. Stu had a party at his rundown house and mixed up the bottles. One with GBL ended up being used. You were at the sheriff's department then, complaining about how they mishandled your case, she said with a laugh. How did you know? I asked, feigning surprise. I love you, fool, she replied. DJP Square was born 10 months later.